All right. So I have procrastinated way too long today to make this particular video. As promised last time I was streaming, I am going to do a commentary on a unique Namosaurus video. One that I think actually was definitely underappreciated at the time, but I full heartedly agree with. Uh, I have been we'll get into this, but it touches on one of the undercurrents in the mainstream art community that uh, I think needs to be addressed. Uh, because, to be perfectly honest, I think that there is a deeply insidious element of the mainstream art community that somewhat has more pull and authority in the art community than people might want to believe. And I know this from observation firsthand as my family was actually involved in the local, I'm not going to tell you where, but local art community. So, but I do think that this particular video essay of his is really good. So I think I have quite a bit of commentary I can add to this. Hopefully, I'm going to admit I did pick this because he is copy left, and so it is just safer to react to this video than it is to a lot of other people's videos. Fair enough. I don't want to step on anyone's toes, and I don't want to break any TOS. So you know, just also for that reason. So I guess let's continue. Let's turn this up.
So I made an 8-hour video essay a bit back, and folks were like, I'm not watching that, which I get. Well,
Yeah, you know what? Fair enough. But that I did actually watch the entire 8-hour video, and yes, there was a lot of documentation and proof of his claims. But I could also see why someone might not want to watch an 8-hour video essay, no matter what the subject matter was on. But I also watched a 5-hour essay on the acting style of Nicolas Cage, so I'm not particularly pressed for the time per se. Uh, but yeah, he was definitely beating that particular horse to death and way beyond it, which is fair because I think he actually is solidly spot on.
stand by that video's length for its thoroughness and sheer ungodly amounts of evidence with thorough explanations and intensive detail to make sure to acknowledge any specifics, nuance, and potential counter-arguments. Now that that video is out, I can make a summary version that describes a lot of the strongest evidence and flash it on screen to prove it. And if you
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah.
doubt me and want details to fact check or just see how crazy this all got, everything you need's in the big boy. Okay, firstly, why should you like NFTs? Because it's been really good for artists. This might sound weird because the overwhelming narrative you hear online, whether YouTube or Twitter, is that it isn't, and artists, especially small artists helped by NFTs, effectively don't exist. This is observably false. Go search foundation.app on Twitter, it gives you a short list of these artists. Click on some you like and check their sales to see that it can be very profitable, even for small artists. This one search from December 6th comes up with a bunch who have made sales recently, and it also comes up with a bunch who have sold a ton, and for a lot too, with new active bids right now. This holds true not just today when I release the video and ETH is up, this was true at the bottom of the market crash when this specific clip is from, in mid-June, July, where you could still find small artists with over 1k USD in total profits still getting active bids. Don't think I'm cherry picking, try it yourself. I did it for this video, and in a single afternoon I found 25 different artists who at the time of the screen grabs were sub 1k followers and made over 1k USD in total profits, sometimes even with single pieces. Some in total had made multiple thousands, even up to 10k. These small artists not only prove the profitability of NFTs, but also are a strong counter-argument to them being all money laundering and wash trading, because small artists do not have the upfront money to risk pumping thousands into the system to buy their own work, and looking at who buys them shows they often have their work bought by multiple different collectors who all have their own social media presence and vast collections from tons of other artists. A small artist being behind all this is absurd. It also makes no sense for, like, a drug dealer to be laundering money through these accounts. These thousands of artists and collectors are way too monetarily interwoven with each other and put in way too much effort to look like small-time artists happy to sell their work for this much to think a company hired an artist to sell their art for their own drug money so that the company has a cover for where it got it. Not only are small artists making high profits, mid-range and big artists are genuinely getting rich. There are literally artists who have 30k followers who have made $500,000. There are artists who used to do commission work like the one who did Ludwig's outro that are now millionaires. I show tons of artists who have made 10k, 20k, 30k, 100k in profits in only the 6 months or so that they've been making NFTs. Those 100k artists only started in October last year, because none of this was during the boom of NFTs. I took these screenshots a full year after, in April of this year, just 2 months before the bottom of the market crash. Even at the bottom, things were admittedly less profitable, yes, but generally speaking, it was still miles better than commission work. I'm not going to pretend it's free money, there's definitely factors to consider, but it's...
I don't know. Let's read this. Factors I noticed made a difference. The better your art, the higher the chance of a sale. Yeah, that's fair. Being social and interacting genuinely with other artists and collectors, regardless of their size, keeps you in the algorithm, increases the chance of a collector checking you out. Don't overthink this or go full sociopath, lol. Just find a way to interact with the community that you enjoy. Yeah, it's basically networking. Setting your reserve prices low to start helps build a number of collectors who are invested in your work enough to bid against each other. The insane prices you see in this video are always the result of multiple invested collectors competing over a scarce product. I mean, yeah, that's pretty bleedingly obvious. Full illustrations do much better than a whip or a backgroundless art. Yeah, again, this is pretty obvious. There's a reason why even in commission you pay for a completed project more than obviously a work in project progress. Patience. It's not unusual to be waiting a month or two for your first sale, particularly if your reserve price is high. It's often slow to start, but growth tends to be exponential. Sometimes all your pieces can get swept by a random collector you've never heard of, even months and months after you've started. Yeah, and here's the thing. Most of this is just true of making money as an artist online anyway, in general. The better your art, yeah, obviously, because people want... I know people don't want to hear this sometimes, but yeah, people actually care about beauty and the beauty of the piece. The better your art, the more likely you're going to actually get a sale. Again, networking is really important. You actually have to be able to be in those circles, talking with people so that you can get noticed by people, and then that's how you get your customers. Let's see. Obviously, you set your reserve prices low because that's the barrier to new entry into like the market that is you. You want people to come to you, and the way that you do that is you start with a competitive price, so you undercut yourself at the beginning, so that you can get people to actually start doing business with yourself. And then when people start seeing the value of your work, you can actually negotiate that with a much stronger standing position. Again, obviously, yeah, he's right about the full illustrations doing much better than work in progress. I already said no fucking shit, right? Uh, Patience is not, and yeah, and this is just anything. I remember Gothix talking about like waiting months and months and months before her project, which it wasn't even an art project. It was literally just streaming before that took off. And the thing is, like, streaming is free. You don't actually have to pay to watch a streamer. Although, to be fair, streamers do appreciate the bits because, they're trying to make money too. They want to be able to make money off of that particular project. Artists do want to make money. If they tell you they don't, they're fucking lying to you. But, artists want to make money off of the thing that they is their passion, their art. So, you know, but in order to make that money, you actually have to put in the patience to, again, do all these other things and let the processes themselves work out naturally. Uh, so, yeah, there's not much to say about this other than this is just generally true of anything if you're going to be successful at all. Um, the part that I'm really excited for in this commentary comes later in there when he starts talking about the motivations of what absolute clusterfuck he's about to talk about. And yeah, because this was inexcusable at the time it happened. But let's keep going.
Very possible. You could find sub 10k accounts making 230, 800,
Yep.
3,400 USD on single pieces at the bottom of the market crash. Mid-range artists, 4k, 3.5k, 20k USD on single pieces. And these artists have only been making more since. This small artist's last piece sold for over 10k. I also show you how big this has been for artists in developing countries. Brazil, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. I show you testimonials of how good a decentralized currency really is in these places. I show you threads asking what these artists were making before versus now, which are crazy to read. There were artists in Thailand that were earning 5 USD per page of manga, now earning the equivalent of their life savings in their 20s per NFT. I also provide debunks for commonly cited stats to say artists don't profit from NFTs, as they have big issues. Like this one claims that most artists don't make money from NFTs, but its dataset literally comes from all of OpenSea with no attempt to separate what people typically think of as an artist from art thieves, shitty clip art trend following profile pic projects, automatic abstract computer AI pieces, shitty Photoshop memes with a filter, or anyone hamming something out in Paint or uploading a few photos off their camera trying to make a quick buck because they saw people sold a JPEG for 69 million and they think anyone will buy anything. All of this would exist in far greater numbers than who you're actually trying to study, so this stat conflates a giant chunk of bad data with quote-unquote artists. It also says many artists lose money on fees, but the site from the study doesn't have fees each time you mint an NFT, only a one-time account fee, and their data comes from a 10-day period right as the NFT scene started to explode, meaning a ton of people just joined and had 10 days to earn back their one-time account fee, or they would be considered unprofitable by the study.
Like, I'm going to pause this here because, again, I don't like the idea of dead air in a reaction video, and we're already 4 minutes in the actual video itself. But this is something you'll find is actually very common in the art community. That technology that comes in and can actually make your life as an artist significantly better by increasing your productivity and your profitability is often demonized. It's not just with NFTs, it's also with cryptocurrency. And it's also with things like AI. And I'm not talking about like full on AI generation. I'm talking about things like AI cooperative art, where you actually use AI to assist you in the artistic process in one way or another that you can't overcome yourself. Like, obviously, for example, if I'm fucking colorblind, I'm not going to be able to master color. So if I'm good at line art and form and all that stuff, yeah, sure, why not use a AI to, help me color in the things? I literally can't see color in that case. Or I might not be able to see reds, so I could use an AI that's trained for that kind of stuff because I actually am colorblind. I don't use AI for that. I use it as a toy, to be perfectly honest. But you can use that to supplement your and accelerate your process because ultimately, as an artist, you're making money and your livelihood off of what you actually produce. So these tools can help you increase your productivity. Uh, like anyway, so it is not just the NFTs, although the NFTs are what we're going to start with. I'm also going to do a later video commentating on other technologies that are wrongly demonized by the art community, and we will talk about the underlying cultural ideological reason why so many artists actually dislike these technologies. And it's not just dislike in an honest way. Some people are actually genuinely confused or misinformed about the technologies per se, but there's a lot of people in these communities who are straight up lying their asses off. And I have a very big problem with that. So we'll continue about this.
Even ignoring all that, this is still like saying YouTube is bad for creators because most people who tried to be one didn't make their money back on the required tools. There's no guarantee or college course, no barrier to entry. It's an artistic medium. Most folks who try to be artists fail in general. That's why I just show you how to find recent posts and sales by NFT artists so you can decide for yourself. Okay, but what about rampant art theft, you say? Art theft with NFTs is no worse than other industries. Just type art theft into Twitter search to get a list of recent cases and compare how many are NFT and how many are merch. If anything, it happens less than other forms of art theft.
Yeah, if you go onto other platforms like Etsy, you can find art theft all over the fucking place. NFTs are not the hub of art theft. Everywhere else, for the most part, is filled with art theft as well. Like, this is just a problem endemic to the online space. Because it turns out, again, right click, copy, or download and then just repurpose it for a project, it's not that hard to steal art online. It's just a matter of fact. And people are going to steal art and make money off of it. And, pre and post NFT. It's not going to really change.
You only see so much NFT art theft because it's signal boosted and sensationalized, not because it actually happens more. This is backed up by specific cases too. The most well known is a dead artist having a single piece stolen for an NFT and put on a niche site and not even selling. But the same artist literally had multiple different pieces of art stolen by a whole company to sell on multiple pieces of merch on a mainstream site literally days after her death.
Yep. Okay. I have a lot of things to say about social platforms too, but I think I'll save that for a later time. But yeah, again, this shit happens way more often on the open like air than it does in any kind of closed network. So it's not happening so much on the blockchain as much as it is in the free web. It's because it's just easier to do it on the free web. Like you don't have to go through the extra steps to actually get, it minted on the blockchain when you can just again steal the art without having to involve that at all. So yeah, it's going to be more rampant outside the blockchain than on the blockchain. So that's bleedingly obvious.
And yet that got less coverage. This trend's everywhere in crypto too. You all know the cringy animations, but you've
Yeah, I stopped watching Saberspark a while ago for a number of reasons, but
never heard of the good ones.
yeah, again, there are real gems of art in the NFT space, including animation. But no one ever really talked about those things. I wonder why. We'll discuss that later.
And the sales and popularity for the stupid and scam projects crypto is known for is always dwarfed by the actual popular things people buy into that never get any coverage.
Yep.
In contrast, I show just how big normal art theft is if you're looking for it. There's stolen art on Amazon, in Sony ads, physical stores. The theft with NFTs are not outliers, it's probably less, which is exactly why folks always show DeviantArt's 80k cases of art theft total, but leave out that it scanned 3.8 million per week for 5 months. Okay, but what about...
Yeah, classic cherry picking, to be perfectly honest. You'll find that, again, this will pop up quite a bit.
The environment. You may hear one transaction with a proof-of-work blockchain is worth like 73 days worth of power for the average US household, but this is crazy fallacious because it makes it sound like each new transaction burns an extra 73 days of power, but it doesn't go up by transaction. These warehouses and sheds of computers, all competing to guess a number first, decide who gets the right to process the current pending transactions. It doesn't happen for each transaction. That's why any rundown of proof of work will say that solving the puzzle adds a block, not a transaction. Even an increase in transactions wouldn't mean extra blocks either, because they're added at a set rate by design. So this shit, the actual energy intensive thing, it doesn't do more of this with each transaction. In spite of this, the fallacious study that popularized the per transaction energy cost got it by calculating the average energy cost per block and then used average transactions per block to get a per transaction energy cost. Then they estimate how many transactions there would be in future and calculate it with their per transaction energy cost to get these world-ending figures that were cited by mainstream.
According to the journal Nature, Bitcoin's growth could single-handedly push global temperatures above the tipping point of 2 degrees Celsius.
This is...
Okay, I'm going to go back to read the text on the actual screen. So just give me one moment.
The average energy cost...
Okay, so here's what the text actually says. Amount of CO2 E produced by Bitcoin usage. Any given transaction using Bitcoin is compiled into a block requiring a proof of work to be resolved, with the winning company/pool being awarded a certain amount of new Bitcoins plus any extra transaction fees. The CO2e emissions from this procedure emerge primarily from the electricity demands of the hardware used and the location where the electricity is generated. To assess the carbon footprint of the global Bitcoin network, using as reference the year 2017, we use the following approach. We start by compiling a list of current hardware suitable for Bitcoin and their energy efficiencies, hashes per electricity consumed, supplementary table 1, to each block mined in 2017, data from blocktrail.com. We assigned a random hardware from supplementary table 1 and multiplied the number of hashes required to solve the block by the energy efficiency of the random hardware. This returned the amount of electricity consumed to solve the given block. So, yeah. I want you to pay attention to the thing that, like, again, this is from 2017. This is where we're using the figures from. I hate to tell people this, but technology has advanced. It turns out we can do more now with the same amount of energy than we could then. In fact, actually, there is a way for us to reduce energy expenditure regarding all this. Uh, Turns out, if you use a ternary computer, so that's a computer operating on the logic of -1, 0, and 1, you can actually wildly decrease the amount of energy required for the same computation. So, I mean, all of our transistor factories are built, for binary transistors. But yeah, it turns out we could actually, over time, switch over so that even like we could reduce the amount of energy consumption required for the same, you know, what would you the same computational processes. So let's see.
per block and then used average transactions per block to get a per transaction energy.
The CO2e emissions of projected Bitcoin usage were estimated using the CO2e emissions for Bitcoin transactions in 2017 as reference. We randomly sampled blocks mined in 2017 until their total number of transactions were equal to the projected number of transactions when we added the CO2e emissions from computing such randomly selected blocks. The approach was repeated thousands of times. Now, okay, so the thing with Bitcoin is, yeah, fair enough. Mining Bitcoin does become progressively more difficult over time by design. Yeah, fair enough. I'll give you that. But we actually do have ways of recuperating the cost from the waste expenditure that they're complaining about in the first place. So we actually do have ways to mitigate the waste expenditure and generate energy doing so. But also, Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency out there. If that's your main complaint with Bitcoin, just use Monero. Monero does not require anywhere near the same energy expenditure when it comes to mining. So even if what they were saying is true, we already have an answer to that question. It's Monero. Like, it not only is it a privacy focused cryptocurrency, it doesn't take as much energy to mine in the first place.
Cost. Then they estimate how many transactions there would be in future and calculate it with their per transaction energy cost to get these world-ending figures.
And that's another thing. So we'll get back to this later, but I'm always skeptical of anyone who tries to predict the future, because you can't predict the weather in a week. You don't know what the future holds, long term or short term. You're not a fucking oracle. It's not going to happen. So, anytime people are trying to predict the future like this, it's usually a fairly red flag about the verisimilitude of the study that they're conducting.
That were cited by mainstream.
According to the journal Nature, Bitcoin's growth could single-handedly push global temperatures above the tipping point of 2 degrees Celsius.
This is all backed up by the rebuttals published in the same journal that published this study. They will tell you the same thing. Transaction number and energy cost have tenuous correlation, and calculating energy cost this way is inaccurate.
Yep.
They even criticize the original paper for suddenly changing how they themselves calculated it in previous papers, making their motive seem kinda dodge.
Yeah, and that's another thing. People don't like to point this out, but there are vested interests in things like cryptocurrency failing. There are people who actually benefit from traditional currencies maintaining their value, whereas cryptocurrencies decentralize the money handling process, which I think is actually a really good thing, especially if you've been paying attention to things like, I don't know, the Visa MasterCard duopoly that we're currently having to deal with right now, that have a monopoly on payment processing. It's almost as if we need some kind of mechanism to sidestep the payment processors when they decide to be a shadow senate or shadow government that sidesteps the the legislative branch, and the regulators. Just Saying.
You can also just look at the actual blockchain to see that there are a ton of small mining rigs that solve blocks, and yet there's no trend of low transaction numbers. If it was doing this for each transaction, no way would tiny rigs beat out these warehouses so often unless the blocks had small transactions. But nope, all average. By itself, the 73-day and world-ending prediction should raise red flags. Who's paying for this? There are transaction fees for users, but they're nowhere close to this, and while miners are rewarded with extra Bitcoin by the system for solving blocks, there is a cap on this, so it'll eventually stop. Who makes a currency where each transfer costs 73 days worth of power? That's dumb. This is all to say that if a new artist minted their first piece right now, they would be burning effectively no energy at all, because energy cost doesn't go up by transaction. The actual energy cost of proof of work is decided not by transactions, but by how valuable the coin is, and therefore how worth it is for miners to spend more money on energy to get that coin. The more valuable it is, the more it justifies larger energy costs. But for things like Bitcoin, the payout is halved every 4 years. So in order to get runaway growth, you would need continuous exponential growth in the coin's value every year, forever, which is unlikely. Just looking at Bitcoin's actual energy growth over the last few years shows this is dumb. The rebuttals also take issue with how they calculate the amount of CO2 produced in the first place, because
Okay. I'm going to go back to read that part again, just so that I can actually provide something in this thing that's not just dead air. So, third, Mora et al. Applied outdated values for mining rig efficiencies and electrical power CO2 intensities, which inflated their estimated 2017 Bitcoin energy use and CO2 emissions values considerably. When estimating the direct electricity use of Bitcoin mining, the authors included in their selection pool many old and inefficient rigs that were no longer economically viable in 2017. See supplementary figure 5, which we can't see anyway. Furthermore, Mora et al. Provided equal weighting when selecting a rig from their pools as the sole rig type to mine a block, thus over-representing slower, inefficient rigs and creating scenarios that require physically impossible rig counts. When we excluded unprofitable rigs in our replicated analysis, Mora and colleagues model produced an estimate of 28 terawatt hours in 2017, which is one quarter of their original estimate of 114 terawatt hours. Furthermore, they applied 2014 CO2 intensities in, I think that's grams of CO2. Oh, yeah. In grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour to calculate 2017 emissions, ignoring non-negligible grid decarbonization improvements in intervening years, despite sufficient data being available at the time of the study for reasonable estimates of 2017 power mixes, applying more reasonable 2017 electricity use and CO2 intensities, and their model produced an estimate of 15.7. I don't remember what that stands for. MTCO2E. Far lower than their original estimate of. Yeah, there's a bit of a difference between 69 and 15.7. I hate when I find this kind of shit. On occasion, you'll find papers that end up getting called out for, um, let's just say, negligent research. Uh, I don't necessarily think this was negligent. I actually think that there was probably some malice in this particular paper's construction that they're talking about. Because it seems really fucking difficult to think that the people doing these analyses wouldn't pay attention to how the technology itself is progressing when doing their calculations. So, yeah, I find that especially as they pointed out in this particular passage, that their research was being done with assuming equipment that was already basically outdated. Not even basically outdated, actually outdated, actually. So yeah, yeah, no, this doesn't strike me as negligent. This strikes me as actually malicious. It actually kind of reminds me of like if you want an example of like a negligent paper, Max Tegmark, really good physicist, but he wrote a paper criticizing orchestrated objective reduction. And to be fair, there are problems with orchestrated objective reduction, but one of his criticisms, was that the microtubule contractions required for the quantum computations that were proposed in orchestrated objective production were calculated by Max Tegmark to be in the nanometer range, the 20 something nanometers, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I read that paper, which struck me as odd because Orco R, it's very, if you know anything about the model, it's very clear that the difference between the on and off state of a microtubule and, in superposition is the width of a proton. We're talking a femtometer, orders of magnitude off. And that paper was just never retracted, even though even though it was called out for being wildly inaccurate. Never got retracted. Nothing ever happened about it. I was like, yeah. I don't know if that's negligence or maliciousness, but you find this kind of stuff all the time. So, let's see.
Because they assume miners would keep their rigs on even when they'd be losing money on electricity costs. This and other factors result in recalculating CO2 electricity equivalent for 2017 from 69 megatons to 16 megatons. Also, industry...
Oh, shit, he called that out. He called out exactly the thing in the paper. Yeah, fair enough. I forgot about that. It's been a while since I've seen this particular video, so I'm relearning quite a bit from the time.
Surveys suggest that crypto uses 56% green energy anyway.
Let's see. Based on this data, it is estimated that the global mining industry's sustainable electricity mix had grown to approximately 56% during Q2 2021, making it one of the most sustainable industries globally.
This makes sense because crypto mining is very different from other industries, as it only needs an internet connection, so crypto mining is one of the few things that they can buy for cheap otherwise wasted energy. Like I show this video from a crypto miner that had people fuming over his shed of computer parts whirring away. But he was just making use of wasted natural gas that was being flared because it was a safety hazard. You can literally see the flare turning off and the mining rig on. Now don't get me wrong.
Yeah, see, exactly. You turn waste into usable material. That's not the only way you can do that. Like, one of my favorite things that I really want to see happen one day are atomic batteries, where you use radioactive nuclear waste as an energy generator. Now, I'm not going to put that in my car for, fucking, I'm not driving a car that has that. But yes, it turns out you can turn waste products from your industries into something you can use for a good. And yeah, like the gas flares, you can use that to cover the cost or help to mitigate the cost of mining cryptocurrency. And if you weren't using it to mine cryptocurrency, you could use it for other processes. But still.
Proof of work does use a fair chunk of energy per year. A small country's worth is actually true, but it's also true of most industries, and most use much more. That's why when detractors compare proof of work to other industries, they only use banks so they can compare on transactions rather than per year totals. Since it's not actually going up by transaction, it's a bad justification to kill prosperity for thousands of artists when you could just turn off your AC, as it's more energy intensive, which makes sense. Look at any graph of what consumes the most power in your house. Heating...
I'm gonna pause. He says it's a bad comparison. I'm going to be honest. It's not a bad comparison. It's a malicious comparison. It is a comparison that is designed to actively cause harm to the person who actually believes the comparison.
and cooling is huge, your computer is tiny, and a mining rig is just a single part of a computer. So if there are 1 million unique miners and the lowest end is 9 USB sticks and the highest is warehouses full of these little parts just sending little electric currents over and over, is this really enough energy to end the world? It makes sense why it's far less than other industries. It takes tons of energy to move and mine with heavy machineries, to process materials and take it to market, and workers to and from sites. Think about what's required to heat cold air and pump it into every home in the world. There's only 1 million of these, and all they do is spin a fan and send little electric currents over and over. It doesn't add up to world ending. And unlike an NFT artist making a transaction, your AC usage actually correlates with energy costs, so don't boycott an artist, turn off your AC. Finally, September.
Yeah, I'm going to pause this here, but the apocalypticism is, again, a really important thing to keep in mind, because that is basically the underlying idea, philosophical substrate a lot of these people carry into these conversations when they have it. A lot of the people who, again, falsely criticize these energy constraints for AI and NFTs and all that stuff, they are being oftentimes apocalyptic. But yeah, it makes sense when you realize what the ideology that is definitely most popular in the art community is. It makes sense. It is an eschatological project, even if they won't admit it. Especially if you actually read the texts where they get their ideas from. It is a apocalyptic worldview. But let's continue.
December 15th, Ethereum moved off proof of work anyway. Its energy use went from fair to near nothing. So maybe it doesn't hurt the environment, but isn't it all a scam? Aren't these guys just buying to get another to buy higher? There are folks like that, yes, but these scams and investors only appeared because of money already in the economy from a genuine type of customer who wants to buy and keep NFTs. You don't look at scalped or counterfeited autographs for sale and be like, scammers created a fake demand for paper with names on it just to scam folks. Obviously, autographs were a desirable collectible first, and that attracted the scams. So what's the evidence NFTs are desirable collectibles too? Well, in my video I show tons of NFT folks talking like money isn't the motivator. Collectors make digital galleries to display their pieces. They write about what they like about pieces they bought. Even with profile pic projects, there's tons of talks about things like trait matching. They do it with ones they buy, they sometimes even do it with ones they don't. I've seen collectors talk in detail for every piece they buy and even do it for entries to art competitions they ran for fan art of their NFTs. This guy did this for over 400 entries. He didn't even own half of these. I've seen these competition hosts boost the prize pool just because the value of ETH dropped. I've seen folks buy the non-winning entries even if they don't own what it's fan of. Many collectors talk casually with artists and ask each other about their collections. Many collectors have separate secure hardware wallets called vaults just for holding, and one look at their transaction history shows they don't sell anything even though they have huge collections. If this was for reselling, you'd expect high turnover. They're clearly collectors. They even do scholarships for new artists. They just give them mint money, no strings. There are plenty of folks here, and even popular comedians who are both fans of NFTs, yet not above making fun of or criticizing anyone or anything in the space.
Oh, how cool, my grandma sent me a cat video. Wait, I'm not clicking that link. Bro, she knows better. She knows not to send me a link. My grandma's trying to rug me.
Folks even openly criticize NFTs.
Yeah, to be fair, a lot of the people who actually are in the NFT communities actually have a lot of fun making fun of NFTs because, let's be fair, all of the niche communities do actually have a lot of fun making fun of themselves. That's actually what makes a lot of these niche communities really immediately endearing, is when they can participate in making lighthearted jabs against themselves, oftentimes for the nonsensical things people believe about them. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've never really been all that against the NFT pro community, is because they actually do have a sense of humor.
NFT games they play despite having invested in them. God's sakes, I've seen them tattoo their arm with their ape. You think he's reselling? They make memes about regretting not accepting offers because it was their identity, and to this day refuse offers despite being twice their buy-in. I've seen folks who have sold their profits say months later, I missed them. There's tons more in the big boy, but the point is, many here do not talk or act like scammers or investors. It's far more reasonable to assume they're just weird collector types. Now if you all don't get collectibles that aren't...
I'm going to pause it here just to look at this. Look, man, people just like pretty things. People have niche interests. Yes, obviously there's going to be a market for art like this. And if you're saying that there's not, you're fucking deluding yourselves. I mean, this is better than the majority of fucking modern art that's often on display, where the whole point is to deconstruct the concept of beauty. I mean, I'm not going to get into a technical analysis about what this particular piece means, because that's not really to the point. But this is very clearly a beautiful piece. It's well made. And yeah, someone saw this online, someone with money, and said, I would like to support this artist. And so they bought their art. It's literally just that simple. I think he uses later in this video, he compares NFTs to hype beasts. But yeah, that's all it fucking is. Believe it or not, the NFT is basically a digital signature. It is a digital signature proving that you, the buyer, has directly funded this particular artist. The NFT itself, the line of code, is the thing being bought. It's like buying an autograph. I mean, it happens to come with this picture that you can probably just, again, right-click save. But that being said, the picture that you can right-click save is not what you're actually buying. What you're actually buying is the autographed copy. That's it.
physical and easily copied on a surface level, but this isn't essential for collectors. Most collections don't make sense to everyone else, and games like TF2, CSGO, and Gacha prove a demand for digital collectibles. Also, the price discrepancy between original famous baseball cards and their reprints prove collectors don't care if a collectible simply looks the same at a surface level, and will go to great lengths to prove they have the authentic original rather than just a reprint, even busting out a microscope to tell the difference despite no one else caring or being able to tell in any practical setting.
Yeah, because the authenticity is itself part of the value. You want the authentic thing itself. So yeah, you're going to go through the extra pains as a collector to get the real thing, not a counterfeit. Again, the authenticity itself as a collector is part of what makes it valuable to you.
This implies the fun of collecting is a pride from feeling you have the quote authentic version of something you're personally invested in, which lines up with being able to click on a hexagon profile to check the NFT is from the perceived authentic source rather than a copy-paste. Okay, so NFTs look more like collecting than scams, but it's also hype.
Yeah, so he does in this video. I did remember this part, the hype beast thing.
Rather than
But
a
again,
copy-paste.
hold on.
Okay, so NFTs look more like collecting than scams.
This is beautiful. Like if I had money, which I don't because I'm a broke bastard. But if I had money, I would totally buy shit like this. I would buy NFTs if I had the money to do so. Because believe it or not, I actually think that NFTs actually do help artists. So, like, and I do want to see more of this. I don't know who the fuck did this. Let's see. I'm gonna have to write that down. Malako underscore Poe. But yeah, I like art like this. It's cute. I like cute things. I like beautiful things. You know, I want to see more of that. So, and I'm not just the only one. People with money actually want art that they can like enjoy because it's cute or because it's beautiful or because it invokes some kind of emotion. And it's the whole emotivist theory of art. Some people take great love in the process of the art. The processionalists. There's all kinds of reasons people click on an art. I don't want to say click on. I mean that switch in your head, not like literally. Although it can be with your mouse. But there's all kinds of reasons people fixate on an artist or a piece of art. And yeah, sometimes it's just because of how fucking weird or goofy it is. Because again, funny is also valuable for a different reason. But yeah, you find something that's really it's kind of cringe. Some people will buy that too. It's because they happen to like cringe. And that's entirely okay.
But it's also hypebeast as well. Don't believe me? Both sell for way more than the cost of materials and labor.
Yep.
Both have limited release drops and artificially scarce products that people seem to want because they're scarce.
Yo, I'm so stoked I picked up these dunks, bro. You like these?
I don't really mess with dunks, bro.
Dude, you don't like dunks? These are crazy and they're so limited.
Huh? Limited? How limited, bro? These are actually pretty fire, bro. How much? I'll buy it off.
Both even call it a drop. Both wake up for and wait crazy hours for drops. Both have scalpers and investors that resell.
I got my stuff. I'm locked and loaded. You need the ornament, bruh. I got it, bruh. It's going for like $40, but I got you $100 right now, bro. You need this.
Both market with celebrities. Both love flexing. Both are featured on things like hypebeast.com. Both fixate on the real thing, despite how both can be copied/counterfeited. Both have overlap with collectors. Many have sneaker walls, none of which they take outside. Both can sell anything as long as they're the authentic brand, even if it's a brick, or as in my video, this popular artist I talked about before sold a black square as a shitpost and got 16 ETH. Both have shit that fails on a functional and aesthetic level but still sells anyway. Both have companies that copy trends like crazy. Both literally have overlap too. Sneakers have started using NFTs to verify ownership, and tons of hypebeast brands have got into NFTs. And there are plenty of people into both hypebeast and NFTs, even display them in the same way, with celebrities being one of the biggest examples, which makes sense. Many attribute celebrity interest to brand deals, but they legally have to disclose that and do everywhere else. But also, celebrities are well known for having money they don't know what to do with. They all have a dozen houses, hundreds of cars, and thousands of clothes, all of which are luxury brand. It's a flex, not a brand deal. So it's more likely that NFTs are just a further extension of the flex, just like the hypebeast brands they wear.
And here's the thing. You can do with your money whatever the hell you want as long as, with certain restrictions. Obviously, like, there's certain things that are illegal for a good reason. But there's nothing wrong with someone who has the money and, like, it's it's extraneous money, so it's not something that they actually need to use that to enrich their life through the purchasing of art. There's nothing wrong with it. And, to be fair, again, with the whole idea of a flex, yeah, a flex is a little bit more of like a vanity thing. But again, it's their money. They can do with it whatever the hell they want, to be perfectly honest. Like, yeah, turns out people are cringe. It's literally just that simple. There's a reason why people actually bought the cringe Bored Apes. Because they're cringe.
Which would also perfectly explain why the rarest and therefore most expensive traits are always the shiny ones. Keep in mind that a scam by
Oh, that's lovely. I'm gonna have to rewatch this later and write down all the art names.
definition requires misleading the buyer, but both the core tech that's all open source and everything I've shown here hid nothing. Oh, and no one was ever mad you saved their NFT. It was advertising bait that single-handedly made these apes synonymous with NFTs. It wasn't an own, you were making them rich. I tried to warn you, you didn't fucking listen.
Yeah, I don't understand how anyone thought that anyone was actually being angry about this. Like, there seems to be some kind of lack of ability to understand your fellow human beings on general online. I don't really know what it is, but yeah, I always found when that was going on, I did find it strange because it's like, no, this just seems like an inside joke, and it seems like a lot of the people are just not in on the joke. But the people not in on the joke were oftentimes the people hoping that their quote unquote art theft was actually somehow hurting the person who bought the NFT when they never gave a shit because again the thing they bought was the signature, which is only on that blockchain. Even from the get go, it showed like a fundamental misunderstanding of what the hell is even going on in the NFT like market and why people buy these things. So
Just like hypebeasts and collectors, people know exactly how practically meaningless all these items are, and yet they buy them anyway.
here, okay, so here's the problem. I get what he's saying, and he's talking to a bunch of people who presumably don't understand that value is subjective. But value is subjective. A cup of water is going to be more valuable to a person in a desert that's subject to droughts than it is to someone in, for example, a rainforest. And for obvious reasons. Sometimes location and context create scarcity, but oftentimes it's just things are valued in different ways. There's all kinds of things that I care about way more than most other people in my life. I have all kinds of niche interests that I'm willing to that I'm willing to put money towards. That a lot of people would probably look at me and be like, "The hell is this for?" I have a bunch of standees. I guess at some point I will put it on. I guess at some point I'll put it on like Twitter or Blue Sky. But I got VTuber standees from they don't really do anything. Like there's no intrinsic value to these things. Hell, one of them was actually even misformed, and I still kept it just because I thought it was charming in the way it was misformed. I have a bunch of books that I can't read because partly because like I do want to actually eventually be able to read the books. So at some point they might be useful, but they're of no particular consequence to me right now. I have a bunch of books in Japanese. I can't read the language and I would like to learn it at some point, but it doesn't really do me anything. I have a fucking book on Lolita fashion behind me. The Very Pretty So Rotten was actually an interesting read, to be perfectly honest. But again, it doesn't really provide any kind of value that is pragmatic to me in any way. The value is in I just think it's neat. It's that fucking simple. Sometimes the thing that makes it like worth getting is just I think it's neat. And that's fine. Everyone's going to have that thing that they just think is neat. And they don't really have to justify it to anyone else.
You can think Hypebeast is stupid for this reason, you wouldn't call it a scam. But calling NFTs Hypebeast would perfectly explain why monkey JPEGs are selling for 100k.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Crown item, oh my god, 6918. Oh my god, it's such a clean piece. Processing. Yo, let's fucking go!
Buyers are hype beasts with huge amounts of disposable income who want to feel special by buying an intentionally scarce product because that means it's associated with things they want to be associated with. Rich people, celebrities, luxury lifestyles, and the hot new trendy popular thing. In short, they want to say they're part of the cool kids club. Like most of Hypebeast, it's a flex.
Like, I know I have the cost statues in the back. I didn't know that was a Hypebeast thing. Everyone's like, oh, PewDiePie is a Hypebeast. I just appreciate art, okay? I just hate how they're ruined now because of these little kids, okay? Oh, it's popular, so it's cool because it's expensive.
This line
I will agree with PewDiePie here though. Fucking the general population does actually straight up ruin niche interests. Because oftentimes when the general population becomes interested in a niche interest, they will demand that the niche interest community change to fit the general population. When it's actually so I have a lot of complaints about particular niche interests that I have being invaded by people who were who never really had any kind of connection to the things that I was, enjoying. That so I could totally see where PewDiePie is coming in on this. Like, I don't necessarily want the general population in the same communities as me all the time. I want to be able to go to a niche community that I actually enjoy and have it stay niche, because it turns out sometimes staying niche is actually a good thing. But yeah, to be perfectly honest, I still don't fully understand what a hype beast is, and I genuinely don't give a shit. There are other things that are way more interesting to me than that, so it's not something I concern myself with.
up. Today's most expensive NFTs were initially sold for comparatively nothing, so the
Yep.
NFT economy is collectors buying things early for cheap and not wanting to sell them, the hypebeasts who got in late but were willing to pay big to get in, investors who attempted to meet this demand by finding and buying things early with the intent to sell to the hypebeasts later, and finally scammers who tried to trick the investors into thinking they had the next big thing that they'd be able to sell to those hypebeasts. It's true there's folks in this space trying to predict what will sell later and buy early, and scammers trying to trick them into buying garbage, but detractors show this and omit everything else, so it looks like that this is all there is. But spending any time in these communities show that half the folks here act far less like scammers and investors and far more like collectors and hypebeasts. Alright, so if it's not a scam and it's not destroying the
Okay, so I guess for context, the hype beast is a kind of person in this economic environment.
and artists are profiting, then what the fuck? Because, okay, here's the weird part. Twitter is seemingly very pro-artist. I show tons
No, it's not. Anyone who actually pays close attention to what Twitter and Blue Sky are will very quickly find out if they have any kind of modicum of philosophical training. Find out that Twitter and Blue Sky, much like the mainstream artist community itself, is actually not pro-artist. It is very, how would you say, there's a lot of coercion, implicit coercion that goes on in the art community. My family, again, I said my family was involved in the local art communities, and we would actually host events to get local artists, their names out there. And yeah, let's just say that the mainstream art community is not necessarily where I would take my moral advice from.
to prove this. Folks there love and support artists. They make support threads for artists in countries that need it. Threads on how to treat artists well and call-outs for those who
Hold on, I gotta read this part.
support threads for artists in countries that need it. Threads on
How to support? Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Okay. I'm just gonna have to comment on the please don't commission an artist if you can't handle waiting a few weeks for it, or if you can't. Yeah, that's entirely fair. There are people that are abusive towards artists in that they don't really understand that you're paying for commission, you're not paying for hours. And I guess this is a good point, a good place to explain this. So it turns out a lot of people don't actually understand how money works. Um, so when you're being paid for different things, you are being paid for different things. It's not the same. If you're being paid for hourly, you're being paid for your time. That's why you get paid more the more hours you work, and you get paid less the less hours you work. That seems pretty fucking obvious. It's the whole phrase of time is money and money is time. It's partly true. It's not entirely true. If you are being paid salary, you're being paid for your availability. That's why you actually being a place or not being a place doesn't actually affect the amount of money you get. You're being paid for your availability. You're not being paid for your time. If you're being paid commission, which artists are, you're being paid for your output. You're not being paid for your time, and you're not being paid for your availability. You enter into an agreement where you agree to have a particular kind of artistic output, some kind of product output. That's what you're being paid for, is the output itself. And this is why, again, the pricing will oftentimes, like what people are being paid in these different types of payment schemes will differ. And when you pay attention to it, sometimes it just will not make sense. But that's why. It's because you're being paid for fundamentally different things. There is another way to be paid, which is how you often get paid in Patreon, which I will never use, and Subscribestar, which is again a patronage. Now, a patron is being paid for their for their productivity. They're not necessarily being paid for the time. They're not being paid for their availability or for a particular output. They're actually being paid for the very process of the art that they are. What in the world? That is weird. Sorry. I don't know why that happened. My stream just crashed. Okay. Well, to continue on, when you're being paid as a patron, you are being paid for the very process itself. You're being paid to just do what it is you're doing because that is the thing that people find valuable. And people do forget that obviously artists are people and that they have constraints that may, for example, make a particular commission take longer or make it shorter to do. Yeah, that's entirely fair. It goes the other way too. I've seen plenty of times where artists who work commission do not respect the fact that they are being paid their clients' hours, their clients' availability, their clients' output. I've seen that many times. So it is not a one way thing. Like, as a client, you should respect the artist, but as an artist, you should have the decency to return the favor. This does not. There's plenty of cases where this has not happened. So, and you don't exactly make a lot of friends when you point out that it goes the other way too.
To treat artists well, and call-outs for those who don't always get tons of likes and retweets. The standards get really high too. Folks ask permission to use art even if it's just for a lock screen, and comparing an artist's work to another even when well-meaning is considered a faux pas. They rally for artists in the
Okay, that's idiocy in general. Like the whole idea of like originality being intrinsically good. No, it's not. There's all kinds of truly unique ideas that are dog shit, to be perfectly honest. Derivation is not a problem. And there has been a fundamental retooling of values in the arts in the modern era, which is fundamentally alienated from the history of how the arts progressed in the first place. And I do blame copyright law and the abuses of copyright law, to be perfectly honest, as a large part of that. Um, the an author's a creator's lifetime plus 75 years is a obscene protectionist racket, to be perfectly honest. Um, but you know, I'm more of a copy left person myself. I think copy left would actually fix a lot of problems in the artistic community.
industry too. They fight hard for your rights and signal boost injustices. High-profile cases of art stealing always go viral. Everyone rallies
as they should, because it's like plagiarism. The theft of art is essentially plagiarism because you're taking credit for someone else's work.
Behind them. Support is unanimous. Only exception was when Elon Musk posted art without credit, but it still sparked an insane shitstorm and the comments in his defense were still the minority despite his huge fan base, so it's a good indication of how the majority of the platform feels. So if Twitter is so pro-artist, you'd think they'd rally behind NFTs for its huge potential and proven profitability for artists who try it.
There's a reason why that is, and again, he's going to talk about this later, but it all comes down to the starving artist. The artist remains in a particular camp's pocket if they remain destitute. If they remain unable to actually make a living off of art, there is a particular camp that actually benefits from it because they become easier to manipulate. He'll talk about that later. I think it's probably going to be around. Yep, probably going to be around.
Especially when you realize the counters to the big anti-NFT claims were easily accessible to anyone willing to dive deeper, which you'd think they do for the sake of the artists they claim to care about. The rebuttals to the environmental claims published by the same journal have been available since 2019, and convenient summary videos of it have been out since November 2021, and anyone willing to look into these communities with good faith would see immediate contradictions in the scam argument because of the way people act. And the claim that NFTs don't help artists, you can't have been interacting with NFTs and artists and not had NFT artists recommended to you by Twitter. That's how I learnt about this. It's not hidden knowledge. There are even 3 big YouTubers who are capable of acknowledging the simple nuance of artists in this space without lying about profitability, even though they were overall critical of NFTs. 2 even flat out said it was good for artists.
NFTs, alright? NFTs are this new hot thing on the market that's great for artists, I would say.
It's just opened up the ability to make a living for these people in a way that didn't exist before. And that is the amazing part of NFTs.
In fact, you had to know if you were pro-artist on Twitter, because you follow artists and tons of them tried NFTs in the last 2 years. There was ample opportunity to wonder why so many artists were getting into it and check how much they were making. In fact, they post their successes, so there's no way you didn't know. So if Twitter is so pro-artist and rebuttals are so accessible, you'd expect there to be unanimous support of NFT artists. But no, it was the complete opposite. Not only did they pretend they don't exist, as I briefly showed before and we'll get into more in a bit, but when those artists are acknowledged, my god, I have never seen such unprecedented abuse towards artists in my life. And those pro-artist folks disappeared. There's huge...
Yeah, because they were never pro-artist. They're only pro-artist insofar as you can conform to their image of what they believe you should be. That is it.
Standalone tweets taking small posts by dicks no one agrees with saying to not treat artists that way that get thousands of retweets, yet you will never see posts like this despite NFT artists being told to die or kill themselves that get anywhere from 0 likes to 35 likes to 170 likes to almost 1,000 likes.
Yeah, the Sero art thing was just completely unacceptable, and that's what he's going to talk about later in the video. But yeah, nah, yeah, I will. I have a deep-seated distrust of the art community on Twitter.
Nothing. And these tweets get virtually 0 pushback in the reply too. I show you artists being called vermin, scum, scumbag, disgusting human being, piece of shit, useless human being, and this isn't shit no one agrees with. This direct response to an artist calling them a useless human being, 210 likes. There are literally direct replies to NFT artists saying it's morally okay to cyberbully them that get 212 likes, and there is again 0 pushback. When I spoke out about this, an account with 70 followers literally tried to justify the abuse and got more likes than my previous reply, implying even among my followers, over half of them agree. So God only knows how many of them were just turning a blind eye to it despite acting like they cared about artists previously. I've seen it.
So, okay. Because I know where this video is going anyway, I've been trying to not spoil where this particular video is going. But if you saw my video on the Charlie Kirk response by Shoe on Head, you can probably piece together, especially since I mentioned the Hegelian concept of history, where this is going and why these people can be so vitriolic to the people who are class traders. So yeah, and there's a bit of a hint for you with that particular phrasing.
An NFT artist's work get called so shit that porn would be a better use for her, and the only push
That is absolutely monstrous, by the way. That comment. Look, I understand that like they got like one fucking repost, but still.
back was bruh. There could be a single positive reply to an artist switching to NFTs going, I hope you achieve your dream, that gets 1 like, and the first response will say, I hope they don't, fuck NFT supporters, that gets 89. The few times this shit gets called out, they will literally just say they deserved it and get way more likes. There was general and direct callouts to NFT artists to be ass blasted and have their careers ruined with 400 and 800 likes respectively. Even non-NFT artists get blocked just for taking commission work from crypto bros and get called brain dead just for being against small artists getting harassed just for following NFT artists. The top comment literally tried to justify it, as did quote tweets from smaller accounts that despite that got more likes. The same account implied tons of big artists spoke out against the abuse before I started researching, whose tweets I can only now assume have been deleted after getting harassed, because I can't find them now, and the account implied that it was literally justifying harassment just for being neutral on the topic. There was multiple claims from multiple artists of death threats.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder what else. I wonder what other like. I wonder what particular worldview believes that neutrality is actually, what would you say, condemnable. Couldn't possibly be a worldview that believes silence is violence, could it? Uh,
Wishes for death and death of loved ones, even for artists under 20k and 2k followers. There was claims of gore sent to email, talks of doxing, signups to vulgar sites. There was literally lists made of these artists. One called Crypto Losers by the account from before who was also bragging about being the NFT hunter, and another who made a Google Doc of NFT artists called Artists Not Worth Your Money or Time, who was called
yes. Again, blackmail. These people will support you up until you step out of line, in which case they believe it is their right to limit your access to the marketplace, which they don't own. Interesting.
calling out NFT artists both in general and by name, and calling them a disgrace to art. Dude wasn't even an artist himself, not that that would make it okay, of course. And
I would bet money. Granted, it's money I don't have, but I would bet money this guy actually has no conception of what art actually is. I would actually I feel confident that, because most of these people can't. Most of these people have not actually ever thought about in any meaningful way what art is. And you can tell that just by asking them some really basic questions. So, just because you're good at something doesn't know you mean a damn thing about it, to be perfectly honest.
And despite the account size, again, zero pushback. You're not a real artist was also a very common phrase.
Again, what is a real artist? Like, we saw some of the art that, like, Unique Namosaurus had on the video, and it was real art. So what qualifies them as not being a real artist? So, yeah.
There were tweets with 242 retweets and 5,427 likes saying NFT artists aren't real artists. That was the third tweet in a chain that blew up like crazy. It's disgusting. I remember the crazy engagement on viral tweets telling folks not to send ironic memes to non-English speaking artists because they might be misinterpreted. But here, people are actually sending this shit maliciously and no one says anything. There's a big post with tons of retweets telling off people for small slights even when well-meaning, like saying an artist's work looks like another, but the same folks say nothing about right-click save jokes despite not work looks like another,
I gotta
but
rewind
the same folks say nothing about right-click save jokes despite not being well-meaning. These can have hundreds of likes and not one reply calls it distasteful. Hell, no one says anything to people straight up saying they're going to steal art or showing others how to see their Patreon exclusive art for free. 44 likes, zero pushback. But get this, if that artist then gets sick of the abuse and ostracizing and takes a spiteful tweet pressuring their mutuals to unfollow her and then mints it as an NFT, even though it's clearly a joke and it wasn't even for sale, suddenly they care about art theft again and try to cancel her for it.
Honestly, at that point, the correct response is to politely tell everyone who is calling you out to go fornicate themselves with an iron stick. These are people who are fundamentally unserious. It doesn't matter if they're actually proficient artists. There is a point at which the character of the person that you're dealing with is so malformed that they are only deserving of mocking and ridicule. And yeah, yeah, I think this would be such a point. This would definitely be a point where it's like you are not acting in good faith. You very clearly do not actually care about like me improving as an artist. You don't care about any of this stuff. You just care that I've stepped out of your particular box that you believe I should stay in. So no, we will not work together, and I will be taking no suggestions. That's all you got to say. Just tell them it's like, all right, I physically remove myself from your space. Go away. It turns out a lot of these people are just not worth having a conversation with. It's just that simple.
Over a tweet, a follow policing tweet, they acted like it was art theft. So you can tell it's the same pro-artist people, not just because they're gone in the face of the shit they used to care about, but because they use the same pro-artist rhetoric to hurt artists. Remember porn would be a better use for her? That was a reply to a tweet trying to claim NFTs are bad for artists, yet the post author ignores this even though they were talking with them. It's the same people. I've seen my own followers call out abusers, but they've literally liked tweets endorsing ass-blasting NFT artists. It's crazy.
See, last time when I was talking about when I was commenting on the Shoe on Hit video, I talked about the response to the Charlie Kirk assassination, and one of the things I brought up was the dialectic. And I guess I'll explain it again here because it's not likely that if you're watching this, you watch that. So the dialectic is a method of simulating reason from an unreasonable perspective. And the way that you do this is okay, so the dialectic is a mode of thought whereby it is believed that you move from point A to point B, with point B being truth, by taking conceptual opposites and accepting them together in the same respect at the same time, and then repeating this process ad infinitum. So you take two things that are logically incompatible with each other. Let's say, for example, dialectical reasoning, and then you take take an idea that is antithetical to that, materialism. Dialectical because that's an idealist way of thinking. You know, it literally places the thought before the external world. And then you take materialism, which places matter allegedly before thought, and then you bring them together to create dialectical materialism. And instead of actually getting closer to the truth, you always just end up with a worse version, something that just combines the worst aspects of both of them, just in a somewhat more sellable package. But yeah, the contradiction doesn't matter to them because a lot of these people actually do believe in a system that allows for contradiction. Not all of them. Some people just don't examine their, beliefs. Some of them are just working on the passions, so they don't actually think about these things. But that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse for the way these people treat, the people they dislike. They treat you as if you're not a human being. They treat you as if you're just a bad thought in their head.
It doesn't stop there. Any excuse to brandish NFT artists as evil is taken. In December last year, I saw among others a couple of big YouTubers brandish an NFT artist as a thief over supposedly stealing a character design for a combination of generic traits like straight bangs and water hair, as if this wasn't well within the realms of possibility to be a coincidence, especially with a bunch of other reasons that come up the second you look for proof.
Okay, I'm going to pause this to read this. She's never minted copyright characters as NFTs, despite having famous copyrighted characters in her old fan animations. There's no precedent of using others' OCs for profit. This is quite common, because it turns out most NFT artists don't just do NFTs. Sometimes they just do art that they don't intend to profit off of. So, yeah. This was her second NFT at the time. The first already sold for for 1,215 USD. There was no incentive to take a risk by stealing. Yeah, fair enough. Let's see. And he is actually correct about this. Again, this was her second NFT, and she did kind of make bank off it. I'm not gonna lie. It would take a single line to make the haircut slightly different from the straight bangs and destroy all resemblance. Stealing an OC and not doing this makes no sense. Hold on. Stealing an OC. Oh, yeah. Additionally, there is no evidence for the rumor it was old fan art. I could not find an older instance of it on image upload sites, despite her other work being there and no replies mentioning the resemblance exists prior to which would show up on Twitter search even if the original tweet was deleted. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But again, this is just a generic, cartoon girl with water hair. It's not exactly a unique idea. Generic for a reason. So, it's not like she actually stole the idea from anyone. No one owns the idea of girl with water hair.
They brandished this girl as a thief with no proof, blasted her with thousands of abusers, and said nothing when she deactivated her main account the next day, and apart from one event about a week later, effectively remained deactivated until August this year. And you can tell it's to demonize her too, because when the alleged original artist spoke directly against sending her a hate storm, no one fucking retweeted it. It's dwarfed by the tweets brandishing her as a thief, despite many of which being from smaller accounts. The best example of how bad this can get is with the same artist. Even months after getting into NFTs, and even a month or two after this drama, she made a completely innocuous meme post on her NFT account about a drop in the price of Ether, and got blasted with 1,500 quote retweets of pure abuse. Nothing positive, no pushback, pure abuse.
Yeah, because it turns out they actually hate you. Like, this is not hyperbole. These people actually hate you. They do not actually care about you. You are a means to an end for them. You are not an end in and of yourself. And if you do not service their ends, they will fucking turn on you.
And this tweet was only a month or two after she made a big twit longer explaining she got into NFTs because she had multiple medical conditions and didn't want to be a burden to her family.
Yeah, remember that thing about you can actually potentially make money using NFTs by just being good at it? Yeah. It turns out she was actually changing her life, actually getting herself, getting herself back on her feet, after she had had her life destroyed by severe medical problems. And then people want to come in and bully the fucking cancer patient. She's not actually with cancer, but you get my point. They want to come in and bully the cancer patient because the cancer patient did the wrong thing. This is actually how evil these people are.
She begged people following her to just quietly boycott and leave her in peace, and that she felt close to a breaking point. Some borderline suicidal shit, and they were still abusing her this much months later.
Because, and I know it's presumptuous to say that I know how these people feel, but again, they don't want the best for you. So, I don't necessarily think it's too much of a stretch to think that that might have actually been what they would have wanted, because there's not exactly a way to come back from this. Like, you've committed the sin. Now, how do you come back from this, from these people who don't believe in forgiveness? First of all, it's not a crime that she has anything to explain to you about in the first place. Seiro did not owe you in the art community anything regarding, because what she did didn't amount to any kind of moral fault. It's not a sin that she committed. She just used the tools that were available to her at the time to try to pick up her life. And again, the art community demonized her for it. So yeah, my view of artists is pretty suspicious.
Even up to August 30th, the day before I released my video.
Oh, hold on.
This much months later. Even up to August.
Ah, yes. I see it. I see the Gnostic flag. Not unsurprising.
August 30th, the day before I released my video, this girl was still getting abuse, which ain't an exception. One artist literally made one NFT and got so much shit off of viral tweets condemning her and follow policing her that she deleted and backed out. Didn't even sell one NFT, stopped within a month she started, but a month later she was still getting 900 retweet posts, not just trying to blacklist her, but straight up lying that she still did NFTs.
Yeah, again, these people will lie about you. And yeah, this is not a one-off. I see this happen quite often.
And she continued to get abuse for a full year. For the record, in a number of cases the abuse is a minority, albeit a big one, but the rest is not much better. This here is the top reply to the artist who said she does NFTs because she has Crohn's and arthritis at 20 and doesn't want to be a burden to her family. All she wanted was a polite boycott and not sending constant hate, abuse, death threats, and gore to her email. The top reply ignores the hate, tells her to stop, and says she can do better. And while there are smaller replies that actually condemn the abuse, this is the only time you ever see them condemn the abuse, when it's in reply to the artist's claims of abuse, not the abuse itself, and often comes with caveats and justifications like they're only doing it because they know they were complicit in the abuse and are now feeling like they're being associated with it.
I mean, if you are complicit in the abuse, then yeah, maybe you should be associated with it. Maybe don't be complicit in the abuse.
There's literally abuse in these threads and nobody replies to them. And once tweets spotlighting the abuse drops off the algorithm, it starts up again, worse than ever, and folks go right back to silence. Which happened with my video too. There was about a month apiece, and now we're right back to it. That artist is still getting abused almost a year on. And
I will pause this because I think I need to point out that the human brain is not actually designed to live with this kind of attention. The human brain was designed to live in a tribal Paleolithic environment where a community would be a couple of hundred strong, maybe. So there are times where, yeah, people do get overwhelmed with what happens online because they're receiving far more attention, sometimes negative attention, than the brain actually evolved to deal with. And yeah, the human brain is plastic. You can actually get to a place where it's like, yeah, I know you can actually deal with this because you've taken the plasticity of your brain into your own hands, molded it to deal with this kind of thing. But most artists aren't like that. I'm just going to point that out there. Most artists aren't out there looking to pick a fight with the whole goddamn planet, and I highly doubt she was.
if you still doubt how big this got, there were huge viral tweets with over 100,000 likes calling artists getting into NFTs stupid and embarrassing, with tweets in the same chain saying they're not real artists.
Again, ask yourself that question. What is a real artist?
To put that in perspective, this number of likes and retweets is on par with origin tweets for recent popular memes. Way too many people agree with this. To add insult, this huge tweet also acts like profitable artists can't exist after the market crashed. This is observably untrue, but neither before this or after did any of these folks ever admit these artists were making money. When folks aren't abusing artists, they're just claiming they don't exist. I show tons of tweets, sometimes with a ton of likes, claiming NFTs don't help artists. There were even 4 big YouTubers claiming the same thing, sometimes with small concessions like only already profitable artists with big platforms, or only artists who got in early.
While a few sellers legit and otherwise made off with undeniably big paydays, hundreds of thousands of artists bought in only to find that there wasn't a new, revolutionary, highly trafficked audience of digital art collectors. Instead, there was a closed market dealing in casino chips, where the primary winners were those already connected, who already had the means to get the attention of the whales in the media, a market where participation required buying into a cryptocurrency at a rapidly fluctuating price in order to pay the minting costs to post the work where it would sit unsold.
The content of the image would probably be of minor relevance. Elon Musk could put up a finger painting and probably make $1 million off of it, while some hardworking artist that doesn't have a huge following could put up an absolute masterpiece and maybe collect 20 or 30 cents off of it.
He seems convinced now that this is the solution for small-time artists barely making any money from their work. Trouble is, the logic is entirely flawed. RAC was able to make money through already having a platform, and that's the only real scarcity at play here.
But all had to either be lying or for some reason spoke very bold absolutes as if fact without apparently stepping one foot into the community, which doesn't make sense either because again they would have been previously following artists who got into NFTs. Some even admit it.
So that's fucking cuckold behavior. But that being said, never underestimate the power of incentive. When you're incentivized to not understand something, that's not a neutral state of affairs. Oftentimes that implies some kind of intent to not understand. Because again, you're actually going to benefit in some way, or you believe you're going to benefit in some way, i.e. you're incentivized to not understand something. So in this particular case with these individuals, they get all kinds of accolades. They actually get rewarded for their disdain of NFTs because the mainstream art community will give them a pat on the back, even though they pump out demonstrably misinformation. And yeah, if you're incentivized to not understand something, what are the odds that you're actually going to understand it? I mean, you can. There are people who do change their mind. But again, it's kind of hard to give someone the benefit of just assuming that they're actually ignorant of a topic when they actually actively benefit from refusing to understand the opposite side.
There were big YouTubers who spoke against artists they were following doing NFTs, but 4 days later made memes implying independent NFT artists don't exist. And when artists get into NFTs and put up their first auction, they're blasted with quote retweets of not just abuse, but how it's a mistake and a scam and they're gonna lose all their money. But their next post, celebrating making 40k USD, suddenly no one wants to signal boost that one. The only quote retweets...
Yeah, because it doesn't fit the narrative. That's it. Again, it's not accidental. It is entirely intentional.
From crypto bros. Detractors didn't question their beliefs or ponder the potential for the artist they claim to care about. Nope. Silence, like they don't want to draw attention to it. If you're even just curious about trying, you get gaslit by your followers into thinking it's a bad idea. Commission work, the main way artists earn money on Twitter, that folks used to say is hard work that doesn't pay enough, it's called a commission grind for a reason, well, it's now the shit, and you'll be gaslit into thinking it's this amazing thing for artists that's way better and pays way more, even though it doesn't, and comes with way less artistic freedom, which you'd think they'd care about because of all the engagement for artists taking care of their mental health. There are viral tweets with 93k likes.
That's a very telling image right there, to be perfectly honest. That's a very telling image. I wonder what metaphysics this concretizes. Yeah, I don't know that I would take moral advice from a person who would think that this is probably a good idea.
That just came out of nowhere, acting like commissions are this amazing thing that more directly supports artists. What are you talking about? Have you tried looking? And why would you claim this so boldly if you hadn't? It's the same with Patreon. Folks offer it up like it's this revolution.
Hold on, I gotta...
Claim this so boldly if you hadn't. It's the same...
Yep, I recognize that flag. I wonder what this guy's opinions are.
With Patreon, folks offer it up like it's this revolutionary solution, like these artists didn't already have them, let alone the fact that NFTs have often made them more than commissions and Patreon combined. Literally.
Yeah, because it turns out most of the people actually buying these commissions actually have disposable income. They have a lot of disposable income. Again, they're hype beasts. And it turns out oftentimes people with disposable income, if they have an interest in the arts, oftentimes they will go there, they want to actually spend a pretty penny on the arts. It's just that simple.
Literally everything is somehow a better solution. In the space of a year, I watched Twitter go from artists are overworked and underpaid to just sell stickers or get a fast food job. It looks suspicious.
Yeah, because they don't want you to actually do better as an artist. Because again, if you're struggling and you feel as if there's no escape, this particular life circumstance actually makes it easier for a specific worldview, a specific ideological infection to make their way into your head. And it can be quite cult-like at times. And if you'll notice, these people act like cult members coming across an apostate.
There's more of this exact same abuse, manipulative behavior, and vanishing of the pro-artist people in the big video. But all of this should be enough to convince you that I'm not exaggerating. This was a crazy big pattern of behavior. So next question is, why the backstab? Here's my theory, and bear with me, I'll substantiate it all with proof. I think that the pro-artist crowd were actually political activists who cared about artists because they were a large group of struggling poor people that could be used as an excuse to push left-leaning policy.
It goes deeper than that. It's also because arts are oftentimes modes of information transmission. When you are producing art, often the purpose of art, the function of art, is to concretize a metaphysics. Anytime, like when you're drawing something, when you're writing something, when you're composing poetry, you're trying to process and communicate that which you couldn't do in plain spoken word right now. Like again, you write prose because you couldn't say it in poetry. And you write poetry because what you're trying to say, you couldn't say in prose. When you're drawing, there's an idea in your head. There's some information you're trying to process and actualize. And that's what you're doing. You're concretizing a metaphysics. It says something about no, not necessarily reality, but it says something about the way you see the world. And yeah, it turns out if you do movies, for example, if you do anything story related, which is all arts, stories are arguments, but they're arguments with which to engage. You have to, you have to suspend your your disbelief, which makes you more susceptible to the argument in question because you're not as intrinsically skeptical of the argument because the story than you would otherwise be. This is the reason why these people want to keep the artist impoverished, to make it seem as if these people have their best interest at heart and so that they can control the art community because if they can control the art community, they can control what metaphysics get concretized and therefore what views of the world get concretized and what stories or therefore what arguments get disseminated to the public in a more easy to digest and absorb fashion. This is entirely intentional.
NFTs threw a wrench in this. Not only did it start lifting artists out of poverty and removing them as a potential excuse for it, but also it was helping them in all the wrong ways.
If capitalism is benefiting you, comrade, then how can you be for the revolution? It literally is that simple. If it turns out that, so I'm going to explain this. Because he's not going to explain this because he doesn't go into this particular detail. But as I explained in the last video, the leftist ideology, the Marxian, the post-Marxian ideology, this is not just Marxism, but anything post-Marx that comes from him shares in this idea. Is Gnosticism pretending to be atheism? Marx himself was a student of Hegel, and Hegel believed in a linear progression of history from beginning to the end or purpose. So the purpose of history was at the end of history. But anyway, and the way that Hegel understood the world was that in the beginning, there was the absolute spirit, God. In order for the absolute spirit to understand himself, he needed to see himself through the eyes of another. So he breaks himself apart. This is where we come from. We are these sparks of the divine who do not know that we are God. And the historical project is when the perfect state is achieved and all the contradictions of history are resolved, which Hegel believed had been accomplished in his lifetime, then we can propagate this perfected idea across the world and we can all come back together in the state of completion. And Marx, for example, was not a right Hegelian. He didn't believe in idealism. So he flipped it in the dialectical process from idealism to dialectical materialism. So all that basically does is it says let's invert the substrate. So whereas the idealism undergirds the dialectic in Hegel's view, Marx flips it so that it's dialectical materialism, which is a circular line of reasoning because the dialectic is intrinsically mental. It's cognitive. The laws of physics are not dialectical. But, materialism is antithetical to the dialectic. So you have this metaphysical substrate where the dialectic, in a sense, generates the material and the material generates the dialectic. There's no ontological foundation. It is it's a system of perpetual becoming, not unlike the God is becoming of Hegel. Now, Marx says he doesn't believe in God, and I'm willing to just, for the sake of argument, just let's say that that's entirely true. It doesn't really matter because the entire structure of the Gnostic worldview is recreated just under different words in the Marxian project. So the Gnostics believed in classes of human beings that were fundamentally irreconcilable with each other. These in the Gnostic worldview would be the Hylics, the psychics, and the pneumatics. The Hylics were the materialists; they had no spirituality. The psychics were the people between the Hylics and the pneumatics; they could go either or. The pneumatics were the people who were fully spiritual. Sorry, they were unable to bridge the gap between the Hylics and the Pneumatics, because the Pneumatics were fundamentally spiritual and the Hylics were fundamentally materialists. They could not come to resolution with each other. Under the Marxian worldview of class conflict, this is exactly what goes on. You have these two classes of people who are fundamentally irreconcilable with each other because they think on fundamentally different psychological logics. You have the bourgeoisie, which would be equivalent to the Hylic class, and then you have the proletariat, which is equivalent to the pneumatic class. The pneumatics and the proletariat have this special knowledge, this gnosis, this critical consciousness that is pre-empirical and is unsubject to questioning. And it is literally something that the bourgeoisie cannot understand. So there's no point in trying to negotiate with the bourgeoisie. That's the whole purpose of revolution. You can't reform the system because the system cannot understand you. Now, why is this? Well, it's because in Gnosticism and in Marxism, you have the shared three doctrine. You have the original doctrine of self-victimization. You are, by causal powers that are indifferent or actively malevolent to your well-being, thrust into your life and circumstances. So being is not inherently good, it's inherently misfortune. So there we have that right there. In order for the communist project to actually work, you have to be a victim in the proletariat class. The second one is this idea of idealism. Even if they say that they're not idealists, it becomes pretty apparent when you think about critical consciousness that they actually are idealists, because the idea in their head comes before the sensible reality. The world around you in your sense perception is fake. It's a construct. It is created by powers that are inauthentic. The Gnostics called it the demiurge and his archons. So the demiurge is that false god who creates the archons, his lesser spirits, to bind the world. Marx himself invokes this in his book On the Jewish Question, where he calls the God of the Jews, i.e., the God who creates the sensible reality, money. And he calls Judaism capitalism. This is the Gnostic substrate of a demiurge who creates a spell to trap the souls of man who come from the pleroma, the land of plenty, to live forever in the land of imprisonment, the world, just in economic terms. The God who creates the sensible world that you see around you is money. And his religion is capitalism. And it goes further than this. The thing is like spirits and structures are very similar to each other in a very telling way. So, immaterialism, so spirits are immaterial. They don't actually exist in a place per se, but they still have causal power, even though there is no material substrate to them. So they are able to interact with the physical world, despite the fact that they're not actually composed of material, of matter themselves. And they have moral content. If you act with or against a spirit, they can reward you. This is how the pagans and the Gnostics believed regarding gods and archons. This is exactly what happens under structuralist thinking from a post-Marxian perspective. Capitalism cannot be found anywhere, and yet it's causally omnipresent because it creates the sensible world around you that estranges you from yourself. It also happens to be something that is complete, again, as we said, not really located anywhere, but it's causally powerful. It's causally omnipresent. It's immaterial, and it has moral capacity. It is inherently in itself apparently evil. But it also has the ability to reward and to condemn. If you act in accordance with capitalism, you are rewarded by this immoral substrate, just like working with the archons rewards the Hylic. But if you oppose capitalism, it opposes you back. Just again, like the archon and the demiurge, attempting to reassert their authority over the world that they create. And unlike a physical laws like the speed of light are not things in of themselves. They are descriptions of things. you can't overthrow the speed of light, because the speed of light is just a description of how light actually behaves in the real world. You can't overthrow Ohm's law because that is just a description of things as they work. But these people do believe you can overthrow capitalism that creates, again, that hyper reality, that false world that deceives your sense perception. Just like the Gnostics believed you could escape or overthrow the demiurge. It is just Gnosticism in a modern economic framework. It is a religion that breeds contempt for your fellow man. Because again, if you're not in the same class, you can't really understand how they think. So you're not actually accountable as the Gnostic for your beliefs being false, because any criticism of it just comes down to, well, you don't actually understand what I'm saying. And since you can't understand what I'm saying, there's no point in having a discussion with you. They come here, again, before any kind of empirical evidence. They come in here in this conversation and say, well, these NFTs are objectively evil, and here's why. But all of these are back rationalizations to get to the point that they're trying to get to in the first place. So they don't move from proposition to conclusion, they're moving from conclusion to proposition. So they're backtracking and creating that line of thought to justify what they already believe, not using a series of like evidential points of fact to then come to a conclusion. So this is entirely on purpose. And you see this with all the post-Marxian thoughts. You have radical feminism with patriarchy, class conflict, and structure. You have this magical thing called patriarchy that, again, is this spiritual entity. You know, I can't point to it anywhere. There's not a single place I can point to and be like, that is patriarchy right there. Oh, no, that's just an effect of patriarchy's power. Well, that's patriarchy over there. Oh, no, wait, that's just an effect of patriarchy's power. Where do I point to patriarchy? It doesn't exist in space. That's the entire point. It is a thing that exists pre-material and yet has moral weight, so it is, in a sense, an agent that can be overthrown. Again, it's just spiritualism masked as modern ideology. And then you have the same thing with queer theory. I say this because there was a trans flag in one of these like bullies accounts. Yeah, not surprising, because the whole thing with the queer theory, queer doesn't mean gay. Queer means abnormal. And you see this with queer theoretic writing, where the classes are, and here's the thing, with all of these models, all you need to do to reconstruct them entirely is just take that initial class conflict in Marxism and switch out the terms. So if I switch out bourgeoisie with, male, and then proletariat with female, boom, I have the patriarchal oppression right there. If I switch out bourgeoisie with heteronormative, the hetero is not really important in that line. It's actually the normative part. And then I switch out proletariat with queer, well, boom, I have queer theory. Basically completely formed, for the most part, right in front of me. And it's not the only things that did this. This kind of thinking is inherently dangerous and inherently murderous. And you can show this through historical example. Like, I know people like, okay, so here's the thought experiment. If I take bourgeoisie and I replace bourgeoisie, because again, capitalism is, so then according to Marx, if I take bourgeoisie and I replace that with Jew, and I take proletariat and replace that with Aryan, I have the entire Nazi framework in front of me, already pre-built. Now, if you actually read Carl Schmitt, he basically admits to this. Like, the Nazis aren't exactly ashamed to admit that they are just basically dialectically evolving from this Marxian thought as well. But, even though they lost, this class conflict still promotes the dehumanization of your fellow man, because it has to. There isn't a way to not do this. Again, if you can't understand the people around you in any meaningful way, you're not the same species. You're fundamentally different. There's no way to reconcile. And that's by design. These revolutionary ideas are this way by design. And yes, this does key into here because one of these classes, they don't talk about it, but it's implicit when you understand how the art community works, is artist and consumer. There's a lot of artists who have a contempt for the consumer because it's this class conflict theory, because it is a class conflict theory set up in their brain. But the thing is, that middle ground that we talked about earlier, the psychics, each one of these ideas also have that middle ground of the people who aren't in one fully, but not in the other one either. For example, in Marxism, you had the petty bourgeoisie. As Lenin said, every petty bourgeoisie has a Hitler particle in him. They are not your friend. They are, they are still part of the bourgeoisie, even if they're not technically part of the bourgeoisie, because these are the people in that middle group who have sided with the bourgeoisie. And here we have the not real artists are the people who side against this apocalyptic revolutionary ideology to better themselves, and now they are the artist equivalent of the petty bourgeoisie. This is why they hate them.
Crypto is a concept heavily associated with the right. Bitcoin's inception came as a direct response to centralized banks, and the core feature and appeal of crypto is that it's decentralized.
Yeah, it turns out Visa and MasterCard can't dictate what it is I want to buy if they can't access, if I don't have to go through a payment processor with them. This is a good thing. There are obviously going to be kinks to work out of the way, but yes, cryptocurrency is a better future than modern standardized, state currency.
Inversely, centralizing is vital to many left-leaning policies, hence the term centrally planned, as in socialism.
Yes, again, these people are incentivized to not care and not actually understand.
But giving government more control over people and businesses is often vital to healthcare, regulation, workers' rights, etc.
Sorry, I had to pause it. I noticed the Australia in there, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Fair enough. We see what's going on with Australia and the UK. I don't think I want centralization, to be perfectly honest. I think I want decentralization.
A centralized currency only helps as you can better enforce taxes and raise government spending. So crypto helping artists not only made decentralization and the right look good, it had practical consequences for left-leaning policy. Anyone active enough in left-leaning politics to realize this potentially had a motive to kill crypto. This would explain lying about anything that made it look good, likewise ostracizing
Hold on, I gotta go back for this.
to kill crypto. This would explain lying about anything that made it look good.
Okay, I gotta read these. So the bottom one says, NFT is dangerous, especially for small artists. I hope not many careless people jump into it just to follow Saito Sensei's... I can't read the end of that. Let's see. Hey, dude, NFTs don't support artists. They're a huge greenhouse gas emitter. Their primary benefit is money laundering. Oh, again, just malicious lying right there. You and every other corporate entity latching onto them only prove how disconnected media figures, businessmen, and elites are from how the world actually operates. Fucking ironic. Again, no understanding of how any of this shit works, but also, again, incentivized ideologically to not understand in the first place. Remember, kids, NFTs don't support artists. They're just a worse version of stock and just propagate bad capitalism practices. Well, are there good capitalism practices? There's a question. Also, does capitalism exist? No. Like, even from like an Austrian economics perspective, capitalism doesn't actually exist. It is just a description of how people behave given certain parameters. So, like, under an Austrian economic system, or understanding, capitalism isn't a thing in and of itself. It's just a description of a range of behaviors. Although they shouldn't be using that term capitalism anyway, because it was invented by the Marxists as an insult to the people who believe in the free market practices. But yeah, again, it was like, oh yeah, if you're an artist and you are supported by NFTs, you're not actually an artist. Oh, interesting. Again, they don't have the enlightened idea.
Likewise, ostracizing and abusing artists pressured them to shut up where they'd otherwise want to spread the good news, which explains why artists got a disproportionate amount of the hate, which is also something I show in the video. While it's true most...
Yeah, because they are the petty bourgeoisie to these people. They are the people siding, even though they belong to the class that is supposed to forward the revolution, they side with the counter-revolutionary. That's why they hate these people. And here's the thing. These people may not necessarily be thinking this in their head as it's going. Again, a lot of this is subconscious psychological architecture that is in place doing the background thinking for them. The thing is that like this Gnostic substrate didn't just start with Marxism. Gnosticism is a virus that infects worldviews by inserting its own genetic code, those three doctrines we talked about earlier, into already pre-existing worldviews, and then taking on the appearances and accidents of those worldviews. And it spreads like a virus. So, for example, in the pagan era, you had, for example, Advaita is an example of this Gnostic strain in Hinduism. An example in like the Hellenic period is the Orphic Mysteries or the Eleusinian Mysteries. Let's see. When Christianity took off in the Roman Empire, you had all kinds of Gnostic strains that picked up on Christianity per se and pretended to be Christian when they actually weren't. They were Gnostic, and these include things like the Sethians, the Albigensians, the Valentinians, and then you had, for example, when Protestantism came about, you had Gnostic movements in Protestant, parasitized Protestantism. Hegel was a Hermeticist who pretended to be Lutheran. Again, that whole origin idea, that whole origin of like the absolute spirit needing to understand himself so he becomes becoming, yeah, that's not a Christian idea. That's not a Lutheran idea. That is a very specifically Hermetic idea. And then again, that idea transmits to a sort of atheism under Marx, and atheism isn't a necessarily Gnostic idea. I mean, like again, Ayn Rand's objectivism is completely antithetical to the Gnosticism of Marx. Like, religion itself isn't necessarily Gnostic. Like, again, the Eucharistic theology of the Catholic faith was one of the main things that helped to drive Gnosticism into extinction for at least a time in Europe. So, yeah, like there are religious practices. Like in Judaism, you'd have a Gnostic strain with Kabbalah. There's those fucking weirdos who believe that Rabbi Schneerson is apparently literally God. Yeah, those people have a lot of Gnostic underpinnings, but it's a highly infectious idea, and most post-Marxian modern ideas, actually all post-Marxian modern ideas, are inherently Gnostic because, again, the dialectic never actually resolves itself. This is why the left Hegelians won and the right Hegelians didn't. Because it turns out, when the right Hegelians say, well, we've resolved all the contradictions, so history can now come to an end, the left Hegelians point out, no, there are other contradictions here we haven't resolved. So we must continue marching forward. This is what makes queer theory particularly so insidious, is that it's not the final state. Something worse than that is going to come after that, because there is no stopping point. There's no stopping mechanism. But yeah, these people see you as a petty bourgeoisie. They see you as a class traitor. That's why they hate you.
Folks, even apolitical and folks on the right, think NFTs are stupid because...
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't really care what Matt Walsh has to say about niche, like, interests. It's just that simple. Like, if you don't understand a niche interest, I don't really care.
To be fair, they look pretty fucking stupid. It was the left that had the motive to be manipulative, to not speak up in spite of any claimed obligation to artists, and to lie about it in spite of any contradicting information they saw, to intentionally spread false claims that in large part resulted in everyone going from thinking it was stupid to full-on hating it. If you didn't care for NFTs, you don't really have any reason to question the narrative. Even if you saw some of these artists, you've no reason to speak out or dive deeper unless you're pro-artist or deeply involved in the crypto conversation already. I'll give you a microcosm of this. If you look at the 4 YouTubers who seemingly lied about artist profitability, and then compare it with the 3 YouTubers who were overall critical of NFTs but acknowledged these artists' existence and did not lie about profitability, or just straight up said it was good for artists, you can find a pattern. Those who claimed it effectively wasn't helping artists all have tweets implying they are highly active or radical in left-leaning politics, 2 of which I'd argue are straight-up political essayists and mention it in their videos. And if
who would have fucking guessed, right?
If you look at the ones who approach this with nuance, I perhaps wouldn't say they're active in politics, but they're sure as hell not left-leaning. I'd say they're centrist or lean a little right.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're not Gnostics. Yeah, or I don't know if they're not Gnostics. I haven't actually watched anything from Solar Sands, but yeah. I wonder if there's a pattern here.
This is not me saying left bad or right good. This is me saying the only ones who are lying on this topic all had the same political incentive to do so.
To his point, the whole Gnostic thing, there are Gnostic like expressions on the right as well. It's not just a left problem. There are right-wing Gnostic problems. I remember back during the QAnon thing, and I had to tell a number of people, it's like, no, this is you're getting taken for a ride. You're getting lost in a Gnostic spell, and it turns out I was fucking right about that. Not that I ever got to gloat about it, but you know.
So that's probably why they were. This is not to say there wasn't left-leaning people who acted on principle, because there were.
And you know, that's entirely fair. It's like with the video I was reacting with Shoe on Head. Yeah, leftist person who doesn't necessarily, I don't think she really understands the ideology that she like sides with, to be perfectly honest. I think she is what I think she is what the Bolsheviks would have called a useful idiot. But that being said, she's a good person. She's just like misguided as to what these things actually mean. And I think a lot of this happens to do here too, where it's like, yeah, like didn't lie about profitability, is still a friend with an NFT artist, you know, acknowledged and defended NFT artists. Yeah, these people may be leftists, but they're not caught in this class conflict issue. And that's why they can be good people. If you genuinely believe in class conflict, you cannot be a reasonable human being because you don't believe that the people around you can actually understand you. And that means that there is no reason to talk to your fellow human being if they disagree with you. So, the people who don't really take these ideas seriously or don't understand where they lead can be good people. It's the people who do understand where those ideas lead that are really fucking dangerous because they are highly deceptive and they know what they're trying to do.
But they were a minority. Point is, when YouTubers who didn't have an active left political bias were deeply involved in this conversation, they all acknowledged the positives and didn't lie. The opposite was not true of the 4 YouTubers who effectively claimed it wasn't helping artists at all. One of these groups seems to have a bias. I've got more proof for this, but first, this all only makes sense if the vast majority of the pro-artist crowd were left-leaning too. The folks who had the obligation to speak out would have no doubt done so if not for the political incentive not to, which seems to be the case. Tons of pro-artist posts have policy mixed in with them that's heavily associated with the left. UBI, minimum wage, free healthcare, concepts like industry crunch come up a lot, and things like unionization are always the solution. There was even a socialist Twitter account that spun the Elon Musk not crediting an artist story into wages are theft for 1,000 likes. Some of the biggest posts simply pin artist problems on capitalism not in part but as a whole, so by definition the implied solution.
Ah, yes, right there. Capitalism hurts all art it touches. Yes, the great superstructure of interlocking structures, the great demiurgic power and his archons that create the hyper-reality that estranges man from himself.
Is move left. Likewise, terms like overworked and underpaid imply a correct amount as opposed to the natural result of the market, morals aside, and so implies government intervention. Even the apolitical pro-artist posts are reminiscent of left-leaning ideas. Things like charging what you're worth evoke ideas of your boss stealing the value of your labor, and encouraging mental health and breaks feels like workers' rights talks.
Yeah, it's inherently adversarial. Like, yes, you are going to have to negotiate with your employer, or, for example, if you're working commissions, you're going to have to negotiate prices with your customers because it turns out both of you are providing value in some respect. If you are an employer and you are employing someone, the value that you are providing your employee is a place to be to earn their living. That is actually a thing of value to provide someone. And yes, there is a dignity in actually negotiating with your employer. And sometimes that means, fair enough, this isn't working, we can part ways with each other. But yes, there is actually a dignity that comes with that actual mutual negotiation about how much you're actually going to get paid. How much can I provide you, and how much am I going to sell that for, is basically what the employee, in theory, is trying to negotiate with the employer. I will give you X, you give me Y. And if you can't come to an agreement, well, you don't have to work with each other.
That's not to say artists who post this kind of thing are even political, it's just a topic that affects them, but the folks who are upvoting it to the moon, that's what I wonder about. Because this is inversely true of the opposite side of politics. Like hustling and grinding and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps are not political concepts either, but they're more associated with the right. And while you may see individual artists say on the commission grind, you'll never see pro-grind culture tweets be liked into the stratosphere, let alone outright endorsements of capitalism or right-leaning policies. Now, by itself, pro-artist folks pushing left-leaning policy is fine. If you care about artists, obviously you want to help them, and this might be the way to do it. But NFTs revealed their true colors. There's tons of tweets that mention artists, NFTs, and then capitalism in a negative context. There's also tons of pro-artist tweets specifically about NFTs that would demand left-associated policy instead of NFTs, especially when artists, some even highly active leftist artists, were like, we don't even like NFTs, life as an artist is just fucking hard. A new potential solution appeared, but suddenly pro-artist folk were like, no, don't do that even though it's working right now. Instead, wait like 4 years for your next election, vote for left-leaning policies, and hope to God everyone else does the same.
God, so, yeah, that line is just straight up psychological projection, shadow projection right there.
There's even big YouTubers whose whole shtick is to talk about admittedly legitimate problems in the animation industry, but lo and behold, the solution is implied to be socialism.
Call me a socialist, but I believe that with the overseas anime industry making so much money, localization teams, including translators, editors, timers, they should all be entitled to paychecks that reflect the amount of money they bring in.
What are they?
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I genuinely don't care if the majority of English language translators get replaced and voice actors get replaced by AI. And if you follow Rev Says Desu, like Hirohei, Colonel Otaku, all these individuals who report on how translators butcher other people's work to fit their own mold. Yeah, I mean, if you're being hired to be a translator, then you're hired to translate. Just do the translation. You're hired to be a localizer. That's entirely different, but I think most people are aiming for translations. They want to see what the Japanese audience is actually seeing. And yeah, if you won't do that job, I don't really care if the AI replaces you.
Think of NFTs? Oh, of course, they hate them and are completely incapable of even a smidgen of nuance on the topic. Even one of the big hit pieces on this topic talks about OpenSea's fantasies for starving artists in the same shot where he rejects a future with capitalism and crypto and says, we need something better.
The whole thing, from OpenSea fantasies for starving artists to the buy-in for pay-to-earn games, it's the same hollow, exploitative pitch as MLMs, by people who looked at 2008, who looked at the system as it exists, but concluded that the problems with capitalism were that it didn't provide enough opportunities to be the boot. Our systems are breaking or broken, straining under neglect and sabotage, and our leaders seem at best complacent, willing to coast out the collapse. We need something better.
Subtle. So when you...
Again, shadow projection right there. Oh, man.
Combine this with how the abuse utilized pro-artist rhetoric and how the pro-artist folks didn't speak out against the abuse, ostracizing or lies despite a precedent of doing just that, you get suspicious. And you check the accounts of who's doing it, and there is an incredibly high correlation of the same politics. All the popular hit piece articles come from folks highly active in left-leaning politics, two of which couldn't even help themselves from mentioning capitalism in a negative context in the article themselves, which is also true of the two big YouTube hit pieces.
Capitalism, late stage capitalism.
Anti-capitalist, hyper-capitalist, rewards the wealthy.
Capitalism.
So there's a reason why they mention capitalism so much in these conversations. Especially when they're talking about art. It's because the art doesn't mean anything to them. It turns out that if you are... what you think art is going to fundamentally change what you think is actually the most important thing about the art. If you are a spiritualist or a materialist, then you do not, by definition, because this is just what these terms mean in respect to the theory of art, you don't think that art itself is inherently meaningful. Rather, it is only meaningful insofar as it serves a particular function relevant to the ideology. This is where the objectivist, I think, actually has the most sophisticated and most dignified view of art as a concretization of metaphysics. That's the function of art. And that viewpoint doesn't make the production of art and art itself as subservient to the will of some external agent. It's not, art doesn't have to be justified by the divine decree or by the, how it moves the dialectic forward. Art is self-justifying because it is itself a means of information processing. It is itself the uh, attempt of man to recreate a view of human life as it is seen through the eyes of the artist. And I think that that is the most dignified view of art. Now, it also paints a pretty fucking bleak view of certain artists, considering what they produce. But yeah, that's why these people who are materialists and not objectivists, that's why they can't stop talking about their eschatological project, their whole idea about capitalism and late stage capitalism, because the art to them doesn't actually mean anything. They may think it means something to them, but their words and their actions actually display that art to them is just a means to an end. It is not itself dignified. It is only dignified when it serves a function. Again, that's why you're not a real artist if you do something that actually makes your life significantly better by making money with NFTs, because it turns out you make something that a doctor with way too much money happens to be like, hey, I actually like the cut of your jib. I'll buy your art. I'll fund you as an artist. That's why they do that. It is literally just that simple. There is, just like in the Hegelian project where history uses and then discards man, in the Marxist project and the post-Marxian project, history uses and then discards the human being, discards the individual, whether great or small. And it will use and then discard the artist as necessary.
Hyper-capitalist,
large corporations,
anarcho-capitalist, the corporatization of everything, anti-capitalist with capitalism.
The same was true of most of the abuse, with the biggest abusers willing to sacrifice the most time on this always having a clear left-wing bias. A ton of the tweets that say NFTs don't help artists also mention capitalism in a negative context. And when I looked at the artists who were abusing or ostracizing other artists or otherwise claiming it wasn't helping them, every single one of them I'd infer is left-leaning, and almost every single one of them was highly active or highly radical, which adds up. While I think most artists were neutral and no doubt just scared to speak up, the ones willing to sacrifice their colleagues and a potential good thing for them were folks who most likely valued their politics far more than their ability to make money from their art. Many of
Yeah, they will throw you under the bus. They will sacrifice you on the altar of their end of history plans.
These artists will act like it's all about the artist when they're against NFTs, but literally the same folks will call out other artists just for being silent during BLM. It's clear they're left-wing.
Again, silence is violence. You don't get to not participate. So yeah, because if you don't participate, they can argue that you are therefore implicitly supporting this hyper reality that they believe that they live in and are trying to escape. So I go into way more detail about that in the previous video.
Beliefs outweigh their desire to be nice to other artists. But this isn't the only correlation. I can also tell the pro-artist group were actually political activists, because this exact same tactic of acting like you love and want to protect a certain group, but then abusing, ostracizing, and erasing the politically inconvenient members of it is a pattern of behavior you can track on the left side of politics across every minority group. I show tons of cases and claims of the left side of politics acting the same way they did with artists to every minority group the second they go against the majority left opinion.
And this is why I don't buy into a lot of liberal media when it comes to like, we're for minorities. You're not. You're just there for them when it's convenient.
Always the most pro-black, but you're the ones that shit on us. The first one, the minute we don't agree with you.
If you switch black with artists and disregard that just using NFTs isn't necessarily an opinion, it lines up perfectly.
I'm going to be perfectly honest. This video back in the day did fundamentally change how I viewed what was going on, because that right there, never once thought about that before. When he made that observation, the entire thing clicked in my head. I had not yet studied anything about like Eric Voegelin's work beforehand, but the whole like underlying substrate of how this was working from a pre-Voegelinian perspective just clicked from this moment on. Now that I actually have some decent understanding of like again the Voegelinian analysis or analytical method, it makes way more sense to me. personally, but yeah, that's why I came in here, is I wanted to at least add some of that into this conversation.
Half the folks from this section of the video aren't even friends of the right. Regardless of whether you are a conservative, libertarian, centrist, or even a leftist, with one ideological difference, you get this treatment. I show you the folks who say it should be okay to call Dave Chappelle the N-word. I show you all the people who actually did with Clarence Thomas after Roe v. Wade, or how George Takei called him a clown in blackface years ago. I talk about Daphne, a trans woman and friend of Dave Chappelle who defended him online, and then a week later, after apparently receiving a giant harassment campaign, killed herself, which wouldn't even be the first example of someone attempting suicide because they were bullied into it with left-wing rhetoric as a justification. There's similar claims just from the last few months, like a libertarian trans woman claiming the police has showed up to her house multiple times now, and that her fairly nuanced opinion on HRT with kids was going to ruin her night. On issues like vaccines, where there's a more significant divide between blacks and the left, many seem to describe a similar kind of backstabbing. ABBA and Preach are fairly centrist commentators. Sometimes they hit right, sometimes left. But ABBA had a whole rant on this, for not just left in general, but specific YouTubers too.
One thing that's hilarious about folks on left, right? The right folks, they don't even like to acknowledge a lot of history when it comes to minorities. But left folks, they claim, right? Riots come about. BLM comes about. They're like, I understand why black folks are mistrusting of the government. Considering your history, it makes sense to me. I understand why even if I don't condone it. Then this pandemic comes along, and they're like, you fucking anti-vax, why would you not? Do you not know the history of minorities in the healthcare system in America? I do think vaccines are the way forward, but I cannot sit here and act like you guys are not fucking giant hypocrites for not acknowledging the very valid reasons why these people are protesting or against it today. I just don't get that. So don't get up here and post your black squares, say all this bullshit about how you support this or that, but then when it comes to what they're going through, you didn't even want to do a modicum of research. You wanted to label them a piece of shit. You want to say you want to kill your neighbors. You don't give a fuck. It's hard.
DeFranco isn't.
So the thing with the Abba and Preacher there, part of the reason that, again, people don't understand what's going on with a lot of this is, again, they don't really understand that this is a fundamentally crypto-religious war that you're being caught in right now. This culture war is not a culture war between some secular ideology and religion. It's a culture war between the realists, which include atheists like Yaron Brooks and Liquid Zulu, as well as people on the religious side, the Thomists, for example. Can't exactly be a Thomist and not a realist at the same time. If you think you can, you have fundamentally misunderstood Thomism from the root. But or even Scottish common sense realists, there are some people who still support that. The realists, but that they're fighting a fight against anti-realists. And anti-realism comes in a lot of different flavors. But it's always the same underlying, again, Gnostic substrate. And when you understand, again, how that Gnosticism actually works and fits into everything, it actually makes a lot of sense, the seemingly contradictory behavior, why that's happening. Because, again, turns out history uses and then discards people, a la Hegel. You are useful one moment, but when you're not useful, then the collective takes priority, and you can be discarded. It turns out human life is not self-justifying under these Gnostic worldviews.
Even the only one. There were other big YouTubers who were all Black Lives Matter, all cops are bastard, who flipped out of nowhere and became very hostile to blacks without a shred of the sympathy they showed before. It's very common, and it happens with trans people too.
My issue as a trans person is the fact that you, a guy that isn't super well versed on trans shit, brought on a known transphobe knowing he might bring up transphobic shit. You aren't exactly a Vosh at trans debates.
I hope that the rest of your life is as horrible as it is every single day, okay? There you go. Suck my dick. I despise you. I despise you more than anything else on the planet. You are fucking cancer. You are just a trans person. Sorry, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
All of this lines up.
Yep, and there it goes. You are just, an X, Y, or Z. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't have the critical consciousness.
With concepts that have been around for years. Popular black thought leaders like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were pointing out very similar concepts back in the 60s, though they often limited it to just whites.
I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes, who usually poses as the friend who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
But just like how there are radical left artists abusing other artists, the same concept seems to be true of any in-group.
It's funny how the most SJW motherfuckers, especially from the black community, talking about community, we have to be, you have to not, we have to not, they're the first one to separate you, or you're not black. They're gonna dictate how the you should act as a black person. They go out and say the most outlandish shit and call you all type of name. Traitor. It's always you motherfuckers that do that. Always the most pro-black, but you're the ones that shit on us. The first one, the minute we don't agree with you, you're like, oh my God, you must not be, shut the up.
Remember how many...
Of course not. Because again, if you don't go along with the plan, then you're part of the petty bourgeoisie. You are no better than the bourgeoisie. It's that simple.
Times abusers told artists they weren't real artists, or otherwise tried to take away their artist card, it's the same thing. And you really can't say it's not a pattern. I mean, a sitting president did this.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
The
fucking head cocking that. Oh my god, a head cock and smash cut. Oh my god. But again, yeah. You're not really part of the class if you don't have the critical consciousness, the critical will.
Malicious assumptions about your intentions is a big part of this too. All the black guys I show get called coon, grifter, pandering, Uncle Tom, race traitor, like it's impossible to believe anything not strictly left-leaning while black, which is wildly hypocritical. If you care about a minority group, you could at the very least take each individual at their word and not make malicious assumptions about their intentions. Half my examples are from this year with big creators, like Gideon going to America's most racist town, not thinking it that racist, and then having left commentators immediately try to apply a bias to explain why the black guy doesn't agree with them.
I mean, I know Gideon doesn't give a shit because he's like, you know, he's a content creator first. Like, that's what.
I mean, no, I do give a shit.
What he's always worried about is you know, making fucking clickbait stuff and doing comedy or whatever. It doesn't really matter what the like message is overall. But that's not how this works. Like, you know, isn't just done.
The video is 2 minutes. He's in the video 2 minutes and 34 seconds.
Even Dave Chappelle, who voted for Hillary Clinton, said he got called an Uncle Tom just for saying he voted for the lesser of two evils.
All these black people call me all kinds of Uncle Toms and shit. I should tell you, buddy, this is a very serious allegation from one black to another.
This happens with every minority race, anyone LGBT who criticizes the community. If you're a Republican trans woman, you get big videos made about you about how you're lying to yourself without a shred of evidence. It even happens with people with disabilities, with prominent left voices immediately scrolling tweet history to demonize and explain why they disagree. These aren't cherry-picked nobodies. Big creators do this because the majority are cool with it, just like with artists. A black justice can make a ruling on something not even related to skin color, and Reddit will equate him to a black-hating, white-loving slave for 27.4k upvotes.
Okay, so again, the reason why this is the case is because you have to remember all of these alleged interlocking structures. These people believe that, again, the world is run by archonic demiurgic forces. You know, these are capitalism, that's one superstructure. Patriarchy, one superstructure. Critical race theory, which is basically just American race Marxism. That, you know, that the superstructure is whiteness. There you go. So if you support the patriarchy by opposing abortion, which, by the way, I would argue that if there is such a thing as patriarchy, which there isn't, it would make more sense if abortion was a tool of patriarchy. But that's for a different story. That's for a different time. You can't really reason your way through some of this stuff. You have to allow yourself to think in the dialectic and allow yourself to allow contradictions in order to understand these people sometimes. But yeah, it turns out if you support one of the interlocking superstructures, you support all of them because they are interlocking. They emanate, if you will. So in the Gnostic worldview, the pleroma, the residents of the pleroma, so this is the place where thoughts become real. You know, it begins with God, the monad, and then from the monad necessarily flow these other personas, these other entities that are in essence one with the monad, but in being separate with the monad. And the last of these emanations is the Sophia, the divine wisdom, who in error decides to create outside of the monad, and that's where the demiurge comes from. Now, again, just transplant that onto the and again, that's where the archons come from. The demiurge does the exact same thing, emanates these archonic forces, and then the material world. And then you take this to the again Marxian concept. It's like okay, from capitalism emanates patriarchy, emanates whiteness, emanates colonialism. If you want to do post-colonialism, all of these structures that they allege heteronormativity. Again, these de facto ghosts that actually rule the world, allegedly. Since they're interlocking, if one persists, they all persist. So yeah, if you oppose one, then you oppose them all. That's literally just how these people think of this stuff. It's interlocking. So again, they all stand together. They all support each other. Just like an emanationist view of the demiurge. So yeah, that's how they can see this. They don't really believe that Clarence Thomas is in any meaningful way black, because turns out by supporting life in the womb, he's supporting patriarchy allegedly, and therefore supporting whiteness or white supremacy, depending on time of the day, whatever the hell they want to call it. I guess whiteness would be more like money, and then like white supremacy would be capitalism in that analogy.
That's an insane assumption to make about someone who used to be a black nationalist, a fan of Malcolm X, and explains how he makes his rulings in plain English. None of them being, oh, well, I just really love white people and I just want to follow their orders.
The Constitution has very strict limits, in my opinion, on the use of race and sex categories. It says citizenship and person. And I think we have to be very careful that we're not locking in precedents that in the long run will do greater harm.
It's a gross assumption to make about someone from a group of people you claim to care about, and just like with artists, it's a very large number of people that seem to think it's okay. And just like the pro-artist people, they pretend to care at the same time, like bragging about Clarence Thomas having his credit card stolen, and then in the very next tweet being like, elevate black voices, bitch, which ones? And just like artists, there are plenty from—
Well, you gotta remember, if you don't agree with him, you ain't black. So that answers your question right there.
the in-group that think this is fucked up, but you never hear from them because those voices aren't elevated to make it look like there is unanimous agreement within that group, despite being completely untrue. And just like how black commentators get called panderer or grifter to explain their opinions, big artists got called greedy scammers who'd sell their family for a buck.
Again, that just seems like shadow again, projecting their own shadow. These people oftentimes, there's parts of themselves that they cannot stand, and so these parts of themselves they tuck away into what the Jungians or the analytical psychologists would call their shadow, part of the subconscious, where all those things about you that you don't want to acknowledge get tucked away, so you don't have to think about it. But just because you hide it away in your shadow doesn't mean it actually goes away. So there are different ways that it ends up expressing itself. So one of the ways it ends up expressing itself is through shadow possession. So you're not, it's when you act in a way that you're not consciously perceptive of, but it's that acting out of the shadow itself. So the shadow is in control of your life, even though you believe yourself to not be partaking in those things that you've tucked away in there. I could have probably explained that a little bit better, but it's getting a little late. The other way that the shadow often rebels is through shadow projection, which is where you project the elements of your shadow, so those things you don't like about yourself, onto other people so that you can lash out at your shadow as it's projected onto someone else. And you could call it virtue signaling because it's about feeling good without actually being good, which is the fundamental, conceit of virtue signaling, which these people do all the time. But you'll find that these people oftentimes are subject to both to some degree. And it'll depend on the person which one they do more often. But Gnosticism definitely shadow projects all the time. They accuse you of like supporting the hyper reality, the prison, the fake prison that they find themselves estranged from the self in. When in reality, you know, it's the Gnostic project that they're in that has created a false world in their own head that keeps them trapped and estranged from themselves. And they could just leave the prison by giving up their Gnostic conceit. Yeah, it turns out these people will blame you for the things that they themselves are doing.
All has the same implication that if you're part of X identity, you cannot believe Y. Which is why, if they can get away with it, they just pretend you don't exist in the first place. The erasure of politically inconvenient artists also happens with politically inconvenient minorities. Like when folks with a platform talk to black libertarians, they focus on skin color, but when they talk about them to their audience, suddenly they're just libertarian. That same black libertarian went on to make his own comic, and he got blacklisted from comic subreddits.
Again, I'm willing to bet money that you guys spend a lot of time in this mod talking about elevate black voices, my racisms, and black creatives, and all this stuff. And the minute you got one that simply had maybe a slightly different political position than what you may have approved of, you took issue with it. Because it's not like this company is projecting or presenting some like hate speech or anything remotely related to this. They know that. It's right there. It's public. Everybody can press play.
Another example.
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I have a great respect, even though like obviously I disagree with him on certain things, but I have a great respect for Eric July. He had a dream and he fucking went out and he actually did it. He didn't bitch and moan about it. I hope to one day be half as fucking successful as that guy is.
Is one YouTuber who's trying to introduce economics from a left perspective to a wider audience, who not only went 20 minutes calling economics racist while only ever showing non-white economists that agreed with him, but then also made absolute statements about what economists must believe if they're not white.
Some individuals may have a preference for white people, but this means they miss out on black customers and employees and therefore will be competed out of the market. It's quite a compelling vision because you don't have to do or advocate anything if you just believe that markets will make racism go away. Except if you're not white, you can't believe the theory because it's being disproved in front of you every second of every day.
But the exact same belief he's referring to is also held by the most famous living black economist that's weirdly never even alluded to in the video. While small commentators or people only big in niche professions like NFTs or economics are easy to hide, even with figures whose existence you can't just erase like Dave Chappelle, you can still see the pattern. They just opt to hide small individual details instead of the person as a whole. Literally, the first article that comes up when you search for Daphne's story completely omits the harassment she got before her suicide and instead attributes her suicide to trans violence statistics, which they blamed Chappelle's rhetoric for. Oh, and God forbid you detransition. I showed an example just from June. Not only do they abuse you and speak for your intention, they try to report the tweet and get it censored, and they succeed. Speaking of, that libertarian trans girl, her account's now suspended. I don't even know when or why, but I can make a guess. For political animations.
Yeah, so the reason they get so pissed off at the detransitioners is, again, you have to remember that the whole point of the Gnostic project is to leave the world of your sense perception to the world of like the common sense, to get to a world that they believe precedes that world, this world, which they believe to be a hyper reality. And in the modern conception, it basically means to leave the constraint of the system. Now, the ultimate form of like rebelling against patriarchy in this conception or heteronormativity is to reject the alignment of biology. Like, you have to ask yourself the question. So, why is it so important that these people get their operations to conform to their self perception? Like, are you a mind or are you a body? If you're a mind, again, I talked about this last time, but I'll bring it back up again. If you're first and foremost a body, then your mind, if you are confused about what you are bodily, your mind has to be brought into alignment with the reality of your body because that's what you are. And classically speaking, the Aristotelian viewpoint is that you are your body. If you are a mind, on the other hand, then the issue here is that you are just a ghost in a however useful machine that it actually has to be. So if you're a mind and you feel a disconnect between your body and your mind, it's not the mind that has to change because the mind is primary. It's the body that has to change. The reason they hate detransitioners is because they actually went through the spell. They actually went through the process. They actually attempted to right their condition by bringing their body into alignment with their self-perception, a mind-first approach. And then they went back, which indicates that they are not a mind, but a body per se. And also, this again highlights the whole Gnostic thing, where it's like, again, the pneumatics are the spiritual. The queer is the pneumatic in this case, in queer theory. Whereas the hylix would be the cis, or the heteronormative. So to move back from the enlightened position of I am a mind and the body must be brought into alignment with the mind to my mind was wrong and I must undo what has been done to me. That is a refutation of the idea of this class conflict enlightened idea. It's a direct attack on that because it's a refutation through experience. And since, again, the whole concept of gnosis is often experiential, critical consciousness, your experience is pre-empirical, unchallengeable to a lot of these people. That is a genuine threat to their ideology. That's why they hate detransition.
They always draw tons of diversity on the left, but never on the right. This in spite of statistics that show they do exist. Even for Trump, 36% of Hispanics voted for him. Even 12% of black men voted for him. That's not insignificant.
I gotta point out that this video was made in 2022. Probably should have said that at the beginning.
It's a decent chunk, but in spite of this, Twitter tries to imply they don't exist by reposting the exact same photo of the white couple in the Blacks for Trump shot, as well as a few others, every couple of months, for years now, to tons of likes. But they exist. You'll find their opinions just by searching it up.
Because I was doing pretty good. But I realized that was because of Trump. The reason I was doing pretty good last year because of Trump. Because the Democrats never gave me shit. I don't have the luxury to worry about freaking Roe versus Wade. I don't have the luxury to worry about that. I'm too busy trying to keep my family fed.
And they ignore.
That is true, but the problem with that is by not understanding. And sure, not everything is. You don't have to understand everything. As a human being, your attention and your ability to act is limited. That's entirely fair. But you do have to understand the people that are trying to keep your family starving or are trying to limit the freedom of your family so that you can be corralled to their ends and not under your own self-determination. This is a thing where I get really annoyed with a lot of people, where it's like, I keep telling people you can't afford to not really understand this stuff. And this stuff isn't that hard. Like, again, you don't have to go into extraneous detail in your reading, but there are people who are putting out the information that I'm talking about for free, and a lot of these people listen to the radio while they're working. You don't have to listen to it every day, but you should probably put one of these free resources on while you're working on occasion, just so that you can maybe catch up to speed and understand, oh, this is why they're doing it. Because if you understand what people are doing and why they're doing it, gives you a better idea of the stunts they may try to pull.
Acknowledge themselves that people pretend they don't exist. They also have the exact same claims of abuse you find everywhere else.
People tell me to bleach my skin, kill myself, you're a coon, you're Uncle Tom.
The only difference between all this and NFT artists is it's not even about opinions. You could be a radical left NFT artist who hates NFTs and are just trying to not starve, and it wouldn't matter. There is literally no situation where it's okay. It doesn't matter if you need it. It doesn't matter if you hate it, don't use it, and just want to add nuance. It doesn't matter if you otherwise have all their politics. You still get abuse on NFT related posts, even ones where you said you were semi-suicidal. Will this story ever go viral on Twitter like all these ones? Not even close. There is no situation where it's okay, because crypto at its very core was at odds with the pro-artist folks, because they don't care about artists. They never cared about artists. They cared about having a political cudgel, and crypto got in the way of it. So they backstabbed artists. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to not like crypto. There are plenty of even artists who don't like crypto. I don't want to portray this without some level of nuance. Simply disagreeing does not make a backstab. But acting like you care so much about artists while abusing them, being complicit in that abuse, lying about them and erasing them from existence, making malicious assumptions about their motives, dismissing their struggles and giving zero benefit of the doubt to their individual situation, actively trying to ostracize them and pressuring others to do the same, or even to some extent just retracting your own support while being pro-artist, all while not making any attempt to check if the justification for such extreme actions was undisputed, let alone inaccurate. That is a backstab. For the specifics, extra evidence.
And he's not wrong. But again, these people will stab you in the back because, again, history uses and then discards people. Your life, in their eyes, is not actually self-justifying. They may say it is, that everyone matters, but the fact of the matter is these people don't, in practice, actually believe that, because if you get in the way of what they believe the purpose of history is, then you are again, as you saw, they'll tell you to kill yourself. They'll tell you that they hope something bad happens. They will they will say all kinds of horrendous things to you. They will try to, in many cases, like with the case that we were talking about earlier in this video, they tried to bully people to kill themselves. These people do not, they they stab you in the back because you outlive your usefulness to them, unironically.
Extra clarifications, rebuttals to potential counter-arguments, how this fits into my current copyright stance, and me getting very, very fucking angry at a bunch of YouTubers I am ashamed to share a community with. Please watch the full 8 hours.
Okay, yeah, I would suggest watching the full 8 hours too, but I was already streaming late and I did not want to. I have to be up for work tomorrow. I can't do an 8-hour stream commentary on that. And even then, if I was to do a commentary on the 8-hour stream, I would almost certainly have to bring in other people to minimize the amount of dead air in there. But yeah, we got to stop talking about this community thing, to be perfectly honest. You're not in a YouTuber community. Like, YouTube is not one community, just like comics are not one community. Anime is not one community. You know, the internet is not one community. We need to get back to having communities that are actually gate-kept, you know, and physically removing, a la, again, Hans Hermann Hoppe. When this video is uploaded, I'll probably put the Mentis Way video explaining physical removal. But yeah, we need to start, again, policing our own communities to not have to deal with this. To be perfectly honest, it's like let the leftist art community have their own community, and let the people who are just regular people who want to do art, let them have their own community. I think that would be a good compromise, because again, none of this really surprised me when I saw it the first time. So I was actually kind of glad that it got called out, because yeah, again, my view of artists, not artists like individually, but the community, quote unquote, the art community, is very, 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 very suspect, very low opinion of it. Because again, I am quite aware of how malevolent a lot of these people actually are. A lot of these people will like say that they're a good person and put on the face of a good person, but then you actually get to know them and it's like, oh, interesting. Yeah, not a very good person at all, are you? I'm not going to go into any personal details about anyone, but yeah, just I'm very deeply skeptical about the art community.
And please support artists.
I will say, obviously, yeah, like, support the artists that you actually give a shit about if you can. If you even just obviously liking their posts, gives some kind of dopamine feedback. You know, everyone likes to when they post a thing that they're proud of. Everyone does like the whole, "Ooh, I got one of the likes on the X or on the blue sky." So, but yeah, obviously, it's all subject to your economic circumstances too, your financial circumstances. There's more than financial ways to support an artist. So, like, if you really want to support an artist, you could introduce the art to like people around you. Obviously, there's financial support. You can, you know, quote retweet. You can repost, quote retweet positively. Engagement baiting is a way that for the artist is a way to actually support the artist too. But I just don't like how vague that sounds. Support the artist. What the fuck does that mean? Each artist has their own individual struggle. They need their own individualized support, and sometimes it's not that easy to really help or to support an artist just because of the niche way that their art works. Anyway, okay. Well, I guess that will be it for today. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure that took way longer than I expected for a react. um, I'm sorry that there was more dead air this time than there was last time, but I knew the part I wanted to talk about was towards the end of this video. It was not a blind react; it was more of a me commentating on this. Um, but I do hope I was able to add something actually substantive to this video. But so y'all have a lovely day.